Welcome to the typical Skeptic podcast, where we dive deep, you decide. Questioning the matrix, from UFOs where the shadows unknown reside. Rob Khalil busting myths like ghosts in the night. Paranormal pros, secret space ops, yo, we keep it real, no fright. Typical skeptical seeking, never sleeping on the lies. Aliens, ain't no hacky black ops in disguise. From abductions to ancient scripts, we flip the script wide. TSP style, mile after mile, truth can't hide. Hold up, TSP crew assemble, we dismantle the fable. MILAB's targeted souls breaking out of the stable. Dogman howling, Bigfoot prowling, cryptids in the mist. Mandela the fifth twist in reality, can't resist the twist. Soul trap snapping, reincarnation mapping, holographic dreams. Near-death visions, out-of-body missions, waking up the teams. No censorship here, we fear no elite scheme. Conspiracy kings ringing bells, hear the freedom ring. Skeptical seeking, never sleeping on the lies. Extraterrestrials, interdimensional highs. Welcome to the typical Skeptic podcast, where we dive deep, you decide.
So I mean, guys, it's doing it again. I hit stop on the. I hit stop, and it just continues to keep playing over and over again. Hopefully, that doesn't do that. So, guys, today I have my really good friend Nathan Ciszek. I'm going to bring him up in a second. I just want to make sure the thing isn't playing over and over again. I don't know why it does that. It's a really weird form of targeting. But anyway, fan favorite Nathan Ciszek returns tonight to unpack his MILAB experiences and how to escape the simulation. We're going to talk about black ops programs, target individual tactics, V2K telepathic interfaces. We'll dig into memory manipulation, handler dynamics, psychic ops, text signatures, and how experiencers reclaim their sovereignty. And with all that said, I'd like to give him a big warm welcome back to the show. Nate, thanks so much for coming back on, man. It's good to see you. How are you?
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be back in the hot seat again. Load everybody out there. So just want to apologize to everybody I upset tonight before I start, so that there's no hard feelings afterward. So how are things going with you?
Well, it's funny. Like every time I try to play that intro, it'll like if I play the one where the thing explodes, it'll play over and over again. And if I play the music, it'll play over and over again. It doesn't matter what I do. It's like a weird targeting thing with StreamYard. Like it just, so sometimes I'll try to do it it's like, it never can go smoothly. You know what I mean? It's like it always wants to make me look like an idiot. You know what I mean? It's like I don't.
Is it happening with when you use other platforms besides that?
I haven't tried any other platform yet, but I'm about to leave StreamYard. But they just gave me a credit for a month because when I was doing the show with Coley, I paid for 2 months. I paid for 2 accounts on accident, or not on accident. We thought we were starting one or whatever, and then I told StreamYard that, so they just credited me with a month. So I was like, well, I might as well stay with them for a month if they're going to give me a free month, So yeah, but things are good, man. There's a lot of drama in the community right now, as always. You know what I mean? People are going back and forth about this person and that person. And to me, it's just tiring, man. Like, honestly, I wish we could all get along. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, but I just wish people, for the benefit of humanity, would be able to get along. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I think if we could get along, there wouldn't be anything to talk about.
That's a good.
Frankly, that's true. Because this whole thing goes along with, everything that we deal with, there's an outside force attempting to create problems. So, it's just the way it is.
Yeah,
so,
I try to be cordial and cool with everybody. Like I'm not, I don't know, if that makes sense.
Well, it's easier to do that because you have a podcast platform that they need to use. So even the people that don't like you will pretend to like you. But if you don't have anything to offer, just yourself, then you'll find that there's people that like you for all the good reasons, and then there's people that just for whatever reason don't like you, and they don't have a reason for it. They just have a bad feeling about you.
Yeah. So how's everything going with you? What's going on?
Oh well, I'm just trying to get my life back in order, and so I guess for for fun, we can talk a little bit about some of the bizarre end of the targeting that takes place. So, okay, we're going to talk about medical COINTELPRO real quick. We'll get it started with that. Are you familiar with Project Nightingale?
No.
Okay, Project Nightingale is a medical records. It's a huge record system administered by big tech. And it was, I don't know how many years ago it was done. It was probably done about 10 years ago. And I think the foundation of it came from, because there was, prior to that, there was a system that insurance companies could look up any patient that had a claim. And the purpose of it was to deny claims, because in the United States, we had pre-existing conditions. So for those in other countries who aren't familiar with that, if you had anything wrong with you that could be remotely related to the claim that you have, and if they could prove that you had it prior to buying the insurance, then you had a pre-existing condition. So what the insurance companies would do is they would go into a database that was relatively secret for AI. So I don't know how it was structured, but I do know that it was very, very thorough. And they would go into it and dig through your past and go all the way back to the, to the womb, if they could, to find any reason just to deny your claim. So in the process of modernizing medical records, they came up with Project Nightingale. Now, because of HIPAA laws, right, you can't have your doctor transmit records seamlessly. You have to take everything the hard way. You got to bring it with you. You got to sign paperwork. It's all due to HIPAA, which is about privacy. But when it comes to the areas that you really need privacy, that's really from the insurance companies, because they're trying to deny your claim. So Project Nightingale is a huge database of all of the records of everyone in the United States. It's all their medical history. So, but the doctors don't have access to the Project Nightingale. So it may have a different name now, but the initial creation was called Project Nightingale. And big tech administers it. And so what happened is, anyway, just to make a long story short, when I was talking with the V2K handlers and I was getting that 16-hour-a-day harassment sometimes, most of the time it was 16 hours a day, but sometimes I would get a bit of a break. And this went on for years, and it reached a peak level. During that peak level, I had the handler tell me, just out of the blue one night, he said, look up Project Nightingale. And he said, you're in it. So I looked it up, and it was medical records. And anyway, recently, actually, it started last year. I was on your podcast. It was that podcast that we did. It was Ida. It was Susan Long. It was Arkeem. It was Catherine, his significant other. I think Matthew Mornian. I don't know who else was there. But I got kicked off about halfway through, if you remember. Mm-hmm. It was like a group podcast we did. So I talked about, I made a joke about trans hormones, because I was having trouble with the doctor. And I said, hey, if I can't get testosterone prescribed through the normal way, and they do the medical COINTELPRO, which is, I was having problems with what appeared to be that. Hard to say, but I was going to go to a trans doctor, and I made a joke about it, right? So because they have a large staff that can get a medical, things approved through insurance companies instead of going through the hard way where you're on your own. And I made that joke. I made a comment about it. And lo and behold, I had to go to that doctor, but it's a doctor that does the trans stuff is another doctor. It's a satellite doctor in the practice. They're actually in a different office, because I asked about it. And anyway, it's a regular doctor's practice, but I go in there. And the first thing they say to me, they start going through my medical history, and they start asking me my prescriptions. And there was a drug in there that I didn't recognize. And I said, and they asked me if I was still taking it. And I said, well, no, I haven't. I don't think I've ever taken that. What is it? And they said, it's for prostate cancer. It's a chemical castration drug. And it's also used for people who are transitioning from male to female. And I'm like, okay, no, I don't know why that's in there. And I got to thinking, it was kind of convenient, because I just talked about it, made a joke about it, and all of a sudden this drug appears in my medical records, right? So I didn't think anything of it immediately. I kind of had a hunch that somebody was messing with me as usual, but it was just a one-off thing, and I figured, whatever. So I didn't make a big deal about it. I just made a note of it. Well, anyway, just recently, I did a podcast on March 4th Productions. And I mentioned, I'm sorry, what? I heard like a
You said
doorbell.
Dawn.
Yeah. And so we did a really good podcast, and I happened to bring up the trans issue. I forget exactly what it was. I think I was talking about people's belief systems overreact. I don't remember specifically how it came out. It may have also come up about, how MILABs are given gender dysphoria, and they alter their personalities with with the alters and so forth. So I brought it up in some form or fashion. And like less than 2 weeks later, I had to go to a sinus doctor because I had a really horrible sinus infection for about 2 months. And I go in, I hadn't seen this doctor in a couple of years. So they had to go through my medical history, and we were going through, they gave me a tablet. I'm going through the tablet to check off, to let them know if I'm still on these medications or if there's any new ones. And lo and behold, there was an estrogen prescription in my file, right? So, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, I know what this is. They're going into my medical records, and anytime I bring this up, they're going to put some type of transgendered hormone care prescription in my prescription history. So, I asked the physician's assistant, I'm like, how does this happen? I said, because I've never taken any of these drugs. I haven't had prostate cancer. I'm not transitioning. So why is it in here? And she goes, I don't know. There's no other way for it to get in there unless you're prescribed it. So, and I said, you know what? I said, maybe somebody in the government is trying to ease me into being trans. I just kind of left it at that, like a joke, because it really is. And this is the kind of thing that you have to deal with at times. It's not just the heavy hardcore targeting stuff where they suppress you from getting employed. They'll prevent you from getting necessary medical services. They will do a lot of things. They'll hit you with directed energy. They'll turn people against you. You have gang stalking. There's lots of things they can do. They get into your computer, put sound effects on your phone. But this is definitely one of those unique ones where they just, they let you know that they're watching you and everything that you do. And even if you block them psionically, even if you've reneged on those contracts that give them consent to do this crap to you, and you start taking your life back, progressively over time, they still will give you reminders that they're there. And that was just one of those things that I figured it'd be worth bringing up. So for those people that are seeing these little strange occurrences in their life and they know they're being targeted, keep in mind that they cover cases from big to small. So even something like that, and it's all part of psychological and emotional warfare.
Yeah. And a lot of people are probably going through that. I guarantee you. I bet you a lot of people are, a lot of the things you just said, people are experiencing. It's becoming more common.
Yeah, I don't know if people are having their medical records tampered with like that. I mean, it's more.
California girl on Rumble made a joke to you. She said Nathan with the lipstick and wig. She was joking. She wasn't being.
I'd be a really ugly woman. I was actually. I've had to take this job because I'm in between work and I've been suppressed, so I'm waiting to start a regular job, and I'm doing the gig job where have to deliver food and stuff like that. And I pulled into this housing project, and all these kids were like blocking the street, and I had to wait for them to move, and it took like a couple of minutes. So finally, I had to tell them, one of your neighbors is hungry. I got to get him their food. Can I please get by? And I think this little girl said, "Are you a girl or a boy?" So when I made the delivery, I told the woman about it, and she laughed, and she goes, "That's just so wrong." And I said, "Well, they're watching too much TV, and it's all they hear, trans this, trans that."
Yeah, it's in their mind. Yeah,
we get it in school. I mean, it's stuff that I had never had to deal with when I was a kid, and it's really too much to have on your plate when you're only 5, 6 years old, and you're just trying to be a child. You don't need to hear all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, Project Nightingale is monitored by the MILAB handlers. So all of your medical records, they know what's going on with you in various different ways, and they can monitor your physiology and your thoughts and so forth. And they can literally sit in the doctor's office with you, technically looking through your eyes and hearing through your ears. But they also monitor you on the other end with this Project Nightingale, which is a huge database. So just to keep that in mind. So let's get down to some other stuff. Oh, let's see. What else could we talk about here? I don't know. Is there anything specific, Rob, you want to get into first?
We were going to talk about escaping the simulation, you know, a little bit, and like, you know, a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, let's get into let's kind of ease our way into that. So, all right, we have a community. I'd like to talk about where I see the disclosure going right now, where the problems are, and you know, when I got into this community, I kind of came into it in an unusual way. I didn't go through it through the social media groups. It kind of popped up when your podcast dropped, and you allowed me to speak, and I had no idea what I was really involved with. I didn't know it was a MILAB at the time. But what I found is that as I talked and as I began to tell my story, a lot of it was pretty dark, and I began to grow a stigma. And the stigma essentially was, you know, don't put Nathan on your platform because, you know, it's very dark stuff. It's MILAB related stuff, and it'll bring problems. And what I found out is that, you know, by talking to people who have been through this themselves, I talked to researchers as well, is that MILABs in general have a bad rap in the paranormal community. We're really the outcast. And this is the reason why the Full Disclosure Now conference is so important, because it's the first time that it's really been kind of like everyone's been brought together under one umbrella. And I hope that over time that it's going to help reduce the stigma. The problem is that a lot of us have gone through a lot of trauma. We have alters, erratic behavior. We go through lots of targeting, and there's periods, there's low points in our lives. So where somebody has an interaction with one of us at one of these low points, we can be hard to deal with, and we can rub people the wrong way. We can fail to show up for podcasts. Maybe we get hit with directed energy or targeting or deeply depressed. Anything can happen to somebody under these circumstances. So a lot of the people that I've tried to reach out to this part of the community, some of them have found out that it's very difficult because some of the people are, you know, frankly, they're disturbed. I mean, they're being tortured. So, you know, they don't quite understand that. So it gets put into the category of just unruliness, mental illness, and so forth. TIs are another big issue, because if you haven't been directly in the programs and you're heavily targeted, no matter what, you tend to be more of at a disadvantage in handling the targeting than somebody that's been in the programs who's more psychically adept. They have a greater skill set. They can handle the trauma better. But the TIs and the MILABs are very much one and the same, because a lot of the same style of targeting and networks that are being applied to MILABs are also being used to target regular people for specific reasons, either research and development or for just stifling political dissent. So, and there's a lot of that going on, especially now, because we're moving into a dictatorial world government. It's going to be dictator actually run by AI, and the elites are going to be above the AI, essentially running the AI, telling it what to do and how to police us. And the public is quickly acquiescing to this very, very smoothly. In fact, there's very little resistance. Most people want convenience. They think that this is the way to get to the future. It's a positive thing. They want to get the chip in the brain. They're enthusiastic about the vaccinations. They want to have big pharma regulating their body chemistry. And people are paying the price for that, and a lot of their other choices as well. But we're moving really in the wrong direction. And in the disclosure community, we have a lot of BS going on right now, and it's been going on for a while. Now, a wise man I recently heard on a podcast, I'll leave his name out of it because I'm probably going to draw too much heat on myself, and I don't need to share it with anybody else, but he said that Corey Good set disclosure back about 5 years. And, my estimation was, Corey Good set back disclosure 15 years. And I think it's closer to 5 now, looking at it in retrospect. But he's not the only one. And Corey Good was apparently a MILAB that embellished himself, that took it upon himself to claim after the fact that everything that he wrote was fiction so he could sue people who he owed money to. And he was very disruptive in the community. And because people are so forgiving and so naive, especially the people using this as infotainment, and even the people in the community itself, they're willing to just let this go and act like it never happened. So for them, he's still a valid source of information. But you have other people that have moved into that position, because this isn't just a one-off thing. This is actually, this whole mess that we're in is designed by these handler networks to reduce our effectiveness in being able to disclose the truth as to what's going on to these horrible programs, the human trafficking, and everything else that the MILAB community talks about, the SRA, the alien joint military ET abductions, those types of things, and all of the horrible things that take place in that. You know, it's very serious stuff. And I, myself, and many, many other people around the world, perhaps millions of us, those of us who have memories of these things and have the trauma bleed through into our everyday lives, are suffering. And we're going through a lot of trauma, attempt to recover from it. But there's really no resources. If we go to a professional, they're going to blame it on schizophrenia. It's one of their favorite diagnoses for these things, because they don't want to confront it. They don't want to accept that it's real. People can't accept that, you know, that the medical system is highly corrupt in this country. So if they can't accept that, they can't accept the government's corrupt, except for the party that they oppose, because the party they're in is the good guys. If they're not mature enough and capable of recognizing that, they're never going to be able to grasp this level of evil and corruption. So all we can do is keep trying. The problem is that there is a clown factory, basically, in our community that is putting out people that are less than honest, or less than, I mean, they're literally out to make a buck, either from their story or just making things up to embellish theirs, regardless if they're a real experiencer or they're just a complete storyteller. And you know, with all due respect, and I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I'd have to call out JP Missions on this one. I'm calling bullshit. You know, I've been in these programs. There's been plenty of people that have come forward. I mean, if you look at these whistleblowers that have come forward, that are being allowed to speak, because if you're allowed to go on network TV or cable TV, or just, you know, like Ross Coulhart's show, for example, you've been cleared by the military industrial complex to speak. So they're not going to target or kill you or threaten you. They're going to let you speak, because they're doing a controlled disclosure right now. Everything that you see has been well orchestrated and planned. People talking aren't necessarily in on it, but they're being allowed to speak. If you compare those guys, you compare Eric Hecker, if you compare some of these, I don't know all the names of them, but, you know, the main ones that have come up recently, a lot of them have been on that TV show, or that internet show, Redacted, which is a independent media outlet. They all have depth in their testimony, depending on what they've been involved with. If they've been involved directly with ET wreckages, ETs in general, or just really the harsh environment of the military, you know, they reflect that. And I've talked to Randy Kramer in person at the conference. I believe he's a legitimate person. You know, he's one of those people you can talk to, and they have the depth of personality. They have the emotional connection to the memories that they have. They appear to be real people who've been through real trauma. And there's plenty of other people. There's Drager Reed you can talk to. He's an excellent example of someone who literally lives and breathes his own memories. I mean, they have a significant effect on his overall personality. He struggles with it every day because it bleeds through, and it's like there's parts of you that don't really fit into society. And you have to deal with that, and you have to deal with literally being all of these other people doing all of these other things. So, you know, the SSP it isn't hard to, I mean, it isn't easy to transition. If you were to come out of the SSP and then transition into society, it's not going to be easy at all. And so it's done in such a way where they trauma split you, they fracture you, they create clones, and they let that part of yourself handle it. But when it bleeds through and people integrate those alters, you know, it is very difficult. But you get to know these people in person, and you get to know them from watching their podcasts. And being one myself and struggling with this, we all have kind of a feeling for each other, and for who's legitimate and who isn't, or who's not, who isn't completely being honest. And I give JP all the credit, lots of credibility there. I mean, I'm sorry, lots of not credibility, creativity, but it just, when it comes down to it, it's bullshit. And I appreciate the entertainment, but the problem is that there's a lot of us here suffering. And when we go public, we get targeted. We have our lives threatened. Some of us get killed. And when you see somebody that's completely healthy, no targeting, no algorithmic suppression, cartoon-like intros, when they're talking, and then when you see all of that, you take it all in, and it just it's a crushing feeling, because it's like, somebody's literally grifting off of us and taking our testimony and just shitting on it for the most part. Yeah. So now, if you take a look at like what he says, for example, if you were to ask him about his military career, I'm sure he would give you testimony that felt real. It would have an emotional connection to it. You would know that he did these things, but he's grasping. He's in portrayal mode, and he's grasping for things. He's using other people's information, and he's turning this into kind of an enterprise for himself. And it won't be long before the stage that he's on is going to end, because Elena Denon, has a huge ego. And when somebody gets to that point, she poisons the waters around the person, and then they get the boot off the stage because they start to encroach on her audience and her impact. So unfortunately, that's these people, and I call them virtual temple complex gurus. They are set up by the military industrial complex in one way or another. Now, somebody could be a complete grifter, wanders in, starts copying testimony, starts formulating an entire story for themselves. And of course, people are inclined to be polite and believe them. People will have, a gut instinct that says, that just doesn't feel right. But they're not necessarily going to say something. And if you're not being targeted, you're not being subconsciously suppressed, where they actually affect people around you and get them to turn their back on you and not want to talk to you without any reason, you're going to get pretty well accepted, especially if you're not algorithmically suppressed with the shadow banning. We don't see that in his case. Now, there are some exceptions to this. Some people are allowed to speak and then later sabotaged. Things will happen to them and they'll fall from grace. And when you look into it, being in this situation, I know that they attempt to corrupt people and they lead them astray. So if they have a habit of building people up who are well-meaning and then tearing them down. And these would be the legitimate people, but the people that are just there to kind of, get some attention, make some money, have fun with this at other people's expense, they can push these people to the moon. They're not going to have any resistance. So, I mean, I just wanted to say, give my critique of the whole presentation that he has. I'm from the old school. I would think that you would need to be more sophisticated in your testimony, much better at delivering it, and more knowledgeable about the technology using these programs instead of just kind of struggling with it like he does. And I think that we've kind of lowered the bar since Corey Good as to what we'll accept. And I think we're now down at the bottom, because literally anybody could come up with a story. If they're not tied to any programs, they're going to get pushed to the moon if they have any appeal. And it's really not what you say. From what I can see, it's not what you say, it's who you know. And that's always been the problem with this community. It's who you know in this community. Because if I was going
to say real quick, this is a good comment from Matthew. Matthew says, it's so weird how none of these supposed super soldiers ever seem to do anything super and instead just sell memories.
Exactly. That's it. And, you hit it right on the head. That's another. I wasn't even going to bring that up, because people who are legitimate victims of this, and not everybody can do this, you've got to help yourself before you can help somebody else. So people who are really the real people will be in the community, and they will help one another. and they form, connections with each other. They don't act like celebrities on stage. We're not here to make money. There's really no money to be made, and the only people who make money are generally the people that are there to make us look bad. They're there to put out a fictional story or fictionalize our collective testimony and make it look absurd. Now, the problem here is, I could watch JP's videos and I could get a good laugh at it, and I could say, oh, this is just infotainment, and look at all the people who believe it, and it's just so silly, and hopefully they wake up and see the real contrast between him and other people, and say that there's no harm done. The problem is this. We're at the point in this fight for disclosure where we're gaining some ground. The public is waking up a bit. They're starting to accept the presence of ETs. Most people accept that the government's been lying about it and keeping it a secret, but the psy-op that's been running, and it started with Bob Lazar, and remote viewing, at least 2 remote viewing studies on Lazar by Farsight and by the Future Forecasting Group. Both of them found out that Bob Lazar was a mind control patsy. He was recruited to be part of this reverse engineering program, but he was basically chosen because he was at risk of being a leaker. They knew he was profiled to be somebody who was going to leak this out. And on top of it, the Future Forecasting Group, I think it was them that not only did they, and it may have been Farsight too, not only did they see him in the actual program and doing what he was supposed to be doing, but he was actually pulled into a room and programmed with mind control to be a leaker. And then he was mind wiped. So one of his stories, he says, one of the reasons that I wanted to go public is because I couldn't take it anymore, because I would leave work and we'd be leaving there on a bus, with the window tint. I think they blindfolded people too. And they were going back to the Las Vegas airport, I believe. We're going on a plane and flying back to it. And he said I would get off of work and I'd be being transported back to my car, and I couldn't remember anything I did. These were likely the points in time where he was mind wiped after being subconsciously directly programmed, however they did it, to get him to want to leak. So when he did leak, they made the extraterrestrial highway. They put signs at both ends of it. I've been there. It's been this way for over 20 years, almost 30, I think. And Highway 375, it's got a UFO on the sign, and it says, welcome to the extraterrestrial highway. The state of Nevada would never do that, or the federal government would never do anything like that if they wanted to keep it hush-hush. They had a reason, because they wanted to shape the entire belief system of the world and to put out the story that all we've done is reverse engineering. And the whole purpose of this is the same purpose for promoting people like JP and Elena Denon. It's to fictionalize our account of these MILAB programs. It's to make them questionable, so that when the mainstream media or independent media first, and then all the people who watch that, when they see Dr. Sala go on Redacted and talk about a confidential source that he has, his name is JP, and then he proceeds to tell Clayton Morris that the ICE raids that Trump is conducting to remove the illegal immigrants out of the country are actually a cover for a clandestine operation to liberate men, women, and children in human trafficking operations who are inside these dumbs that are under most major cities, or at least a certain percentage of them. And this becomes independent media news on a well-trusted independent media outlet, which is Redacted. They've had Tucker Carlson has been on there. The guy that does the show with his wife is friends with Tucker. They used to work, I believe, at Fox News together. And I think his wife has done other things in journalism too. I don't know her background. But yeah, I mean, when you get to the point where you can go on a show like that and you're spreading this information that's false, it really gets into the vein of the few people that are really paying attention right now. These are the people looking at the independent media outlets and trying to make sense of it. A lot of these outlets have been compromised now. But the problem is that the ground that we're gaining is not ground that we're actually accomplishing on our own. There's people that are taking the lead of this and are putting out bad information. So what's going to happen eventually is when these people see that none of this is true, they're going to think the entire disclosure movement is bullshit. And they're going to think about, they're not going to remember Drago Reed. They're not going to even see him. He'll be shadow banned and completely hidden. I'll be hidden. There'll be many, many other people that are well-meaning and are telling the truth and are trying to get this story out and trying to help each other. They're not going to be heard from. It's going to be the people that are putting out the fiction, that are embellishing themselves, that are either partially in the programs or had something to do with it, but then they're adding to their story to make a living, to make money, because nobody wants to do these miserable jobs that everybody has to do. It's easy to be an influencer. It's great work. You get to go to conferences and you get to live this dreamy existence that you see people in social media doing. You know, it's like they don't work. They just seem like they're independently wealthy, and they get to travel around and do conferences, and they write books, and they get paid to speak. And, you know, they have the super chats like a David Wilcock, and it's alluring. It's like, okay, yeah, that would be great if I could do something like that. Well, you know, that isn't a reality for the real people. The real people don't get that unless they've got an agenda for somebody. You know, they're always going to let somebody squeak out, you know, like a Tony Rodriguez. Just, you know, he's real, but you're going to get him out there and, you know, let him blow up. But they'll take Tony and they'll put him on stage with people that discredit him. And that's the other issue too. So if you get invited to that side of the community, you run the risk of being lumped in with the rest of them. And when you have a few bad apples that are just there to get attention for themselves, to make some money, whatever the case is, fulfill whatever need they have to do this, or maybe they're being subconsciously mind controlled, or they're consciously doing it. We get pushed into that group, and we're seen in that same light, and that's where the problem is. So when you have Corey Good setting the community back, the whole movement back 5 years, I mean, take a look at Elena Denon, take a look at these folks, take a look at Dr. Sala, take a look at JP Missions. Ask yourself, how many years are they pushing this back? Because when it comes down to it, they're going to ensure that nobody pays attention to us. They're going to see them and say, there's no way that that's true. They're going to look at them and they're going to miss us, and they're going to frame this the way the government wants it to be framed, that it's just a reverse engineering program, and they have no treaties with extraterrestrials. They don't know what's going on. They're in, you know, it's just a very innocent thing that the government's in. They're just kind of stuck in the middle. There's this otherworldly force now that we're dealing with. So that leaves the door open for a staged alien invasion. It leaves the door open for a lot of possibilities and psy-ops. And 3 AI Atlas is one of these examples of this. There's something anomalous about this thing. It appears to be artificial. There's people that have been remote viewing it and have determined that there's some intelligences inside this or operating it. I've heard different versions of this. I've heard that, you know, they're in stasis, they're being pulled by a tractor beam, they're conscious, they're not physically there, they're kind of etheric beings. I've heard a variety of you know, remote viewing claims of this. And I haven't done anything myself. I don't have a tasker to do the remote viewing with, and I haven't put the time into it. So I have no way to talk about my own experiences with that. But I'm just reporting on what I'm seeing. But what I am seeing more or less, though, is anytime the government or the media, and including the independent media too, because they have a system that controls the independent media. And it's no different than the way they control disclosure. They have certain people that break free of the containment that everybody else is in. And they get out and they're able to go on Alex Jones, and they're able to go on Redacted and other programs. And they are unfortunately representing us. These are the Billy Carsons. These are the JP Missions, who speaks through Dr. Sala, and there's other people that have done this. And when you have that going on, and you have like people like Eric Hecker who don't want to associate with us because it makes his testimony look bad, and then, you know, there's a problem there. So that's a rift that's happening. So the whistleblowers that they're having the ability to speak, the ones that would be reachable, don't want to talk to us because we look bad. And there's a big divide in the community as well when it comes to influencers and researchers, because everybody's broken up in different genres and and each one has a different belief system. So you have the Christians, okay? A lot of them believe these are demons. And, I would say they're half right, because these are the beings that have portrayed the demons and the angels the entire time. This is a simulation. This is a conscious simulation. It's a prison planet. They keep us in an artificial augmented reality where they play God and the devil. Now, and they control us that way. So it reflects into the disclosure community. So you have people like L.A. Mazzulli, who stays away from the MILAB stuff. And it would be great if we could get his attention, but he's only given his attention he did a project. I think he did a documentary too. It was either a documentary, but I know it was a series of podcasts. And what he was doing was he was introducing people who were being abducted to the Christian way of looking at things, and using Jesus, the power of Christ, to force away the grays that were doing these abductions. And for people that are really tuned into how this works, it has to do with engineering consent. When you turn to God, you're turning away from them. So you're automatically decreasing the level of consent that you're giving them. That alone has a substantial effect, because the simulation is set up, and the way the creator's rules are, essentially we are creators. And in order for us to be put into this situation and controlled like this and put in augmented reality, we at some point have to begin consenting to it. The consent can be given through coercion and deception. So where we agree to something that we don't know, we don't fully understand, we're tricked into it. That's fine under these particular rules, apparently. So as long as you're giving consent, they have control. So the Christian researchers are onto something very important. The problem is it never gets to the rest of us, because there's this divide. They don't want to talk to us. Now, there's one exception, and this is also has to do with Eric Hecker too. There's only been one person, and that is Maria. What is it? I'm trying to think of her name, Rob. She's got fair skin like me. She's got blonde hair. It's Maria. God, I can't think of her name. You know what I'm talking about? I know it's Maria or Marina Amor. No, I can't. Marina
Saren. Marina Saren.
Yeah, right. So she has been on L.A. Mazzulli's program as an interview, and she was on Linda Moulton Howe and Eric Hecker. So she's been to all three, and I think it had to do with a conference. I think that's how she got the exposure to these people. The problem there is that Marina is not the best example of someone to represent all of us, but that's the way it was framed, because these guys picked the person that they could tear down the easiest, and then they put them on their show, and they did just that. So they made an example of us by making an example of her. And, I'm not here to tear her down. There's plenty of critics and people who said things about her. I'm not going to do that. I'm just pointing out that there's better people to put on. If you're going to put her on, then put other people on. Okay. Put Drago Reed on L.A. Mazzulli's program. Let him ask him questions. Okay. Let's get people that have real in-depth, accurate, and very clear testimony. Let's get people with real credibility who can articulate this whole thing in the way that it needs to be articulated. And there's plenty of us out there. Give everybody a chance to talk. Don't just sample the people that you think are going to be easy to tear down. And that's what they've done. And this had to be said, because it's going to continue. We need to call this stuff out. So if I upset anybody by saying these things, I'm sorry, but these are inconvenient truths that need to be spoken. I can't just sit here and go along with the old rules of the way that we always did things, which is where if there's a problem in the community, you don't talk about it, you don't criticize or point the finger. You can do it in a polite way. No offense to JP. I mean, like I said, I think that it's a brilliant grift. It's a It's an exercise in human psychology and marketing, and it tells a lot about the state, the cognitive state of the public, and their ability to discern falsehoods and truth. And it says a lot about people who are looking for truth, that they really just don't have the intuition.
Yeah.
They're still very, very lost, and they're easy to impress. They're easy to lead astray. And when the algorithms are the ones or the source of the information, it's literally the filter that's dictating what people see. If all they see is this fluffy new age stuff mixed in with these MILAB stories to make it into some type of a sci-fi infotainment presentation, it completely destroys our collective testimony, and it makes everything that we're trying to do pretty much impossible to actually do with any measure of success, because they're not going to see us. They're going to see those people. They're the ones who are representing us. And I think that we can politely point this stuff out and openly have open discourse on it. So, I'm sure I'll be taking a lot of shit for this, but I just, I had to say it. It had to be said. Somebody had to do it.
Yeah, no, it's good, man. I agree with you. And, I was seeing if there was any interesting comments from, I think people are just agreeing with you in the chat, Brandon Bejan says, what do you think of John Ramirez's testimony?
I don't really get into this type of thing about pointing fingers. I don't know John Ramirez. I'm just pointing out the people that are obvious, that are literally causing a problem. And it has to do with, JP's information going on the redacted, because that's really going to do some damage. Corey Good never made it that far. And I think Corey Good got a little bit on the History Channel with David Wilcock. I think Randy Kramer broke through the veil a little bit. He's been on 1 or 2 or 3 programs. The thing with Randy is that it appeared that, he had some military handlers, like a lot of us do. And I think what happened to him is they just kind of led him down the wrong path, and he kind of sabotaged himself for a while. I don't want to get into that, but that happens with some individuals. I mean, they come forward, they have real testimony, and they're either put on the stage with the wrong people or allowed to be put on the stage, and that kind of, discredits them, or they're led down a path where they make some personal mistakes, and then it looks bad for them, and then ultimately looks bad for us. But, I'm a forgiving person. So people make mistakes. But the problem is that, we have a situation where this is our time really to really get this testimony out. It's the first time in the history of the world that we have this opportunity. And I see it just being pissed away. And it's a real shame, because when you go public like this, first thing I noticed was for me, and I hadn't said anything online except for just comments on her videos. I had no public or no social media presence whatsoever. I was literally I experienced hardcore shadow banning from the beginning, as well as suppression in the community. I had people who didn't want to talk to me. And I thought, you watch these programs where, somebody gets abducted, they start remembering, and they contact a researcher, they're right on it, they contact them back. None of that's really the way this works. Most people get ignored. They've created a system where they can influence people subconsciously, to where if you reach out to someone in need of help, or actually you're in need of help, or you want to talk about your testimony, it's going to be hard to find somebody to listen unless the handlers want you to be heard. Now, early on, Rob, there was a lady that works for MUFON. There's another example. MUFON is a big problem because they won't deal with the MILAB issue. MUFON was infiltrated a long time ago by the Central Intelligence Agency. It's been influenced ever since. They're not going to touch this subject. They've tried to dabble in it a little bit in the past, but from my experience, they won't handle it at all. There was a lady you referred me to for a hypnotic regression. As soon as she found out that I was a MILAB, she wouldn't return my calls after giving me her office number. And it was an interesting experience, because all of a sudden she want nothing to do with me. She wouldn't answer my emails or anything. Up to that point, she was more than happy to help me. And it was just the MILAB thing that came up, and that was it. It wasn't that somebody got to her, called her up, or was or even influenced her. It's just the fact that I was betraying myself or looked like a MILAB at the time that I was seeking help. And that's a stigma that we've got to do something about. And I think conferences are a way to do that, but I think more people need to come forward, share their testimony. I think time is really what's going to work. But I think we really do have to call out the bullshit, because it has gotten to the point where there's no end to it at this point. It's just going to keep flowing like a river, and the river is going to widen its banks until it's going to be a massive flow of an ocean. And we're going to get washed away in it, and our testimony is not going to be heard. So
yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's just a shame too, because honestly, I agree 100% with everything you're saying, Nate. I mean, it's hard. Like, so how do we? I mean, how do you think people can discern better? I mean, as we move, because I think that's what people need to do, is use their discernment about some of these people that are speaking out.
This goes to the way of deprogramming from the simulation itself. And the simulation, you can look at this different ways. You can say there's a highly technological consciousness simulation there's genetic suppression of human psychic abilities. I mean, that's obvious. But if you look at the initial portion of the simulation, it's a false reality that you're born into, and you're taught about this false reality from a young child. So it builds, and you start getting you develop a belief system according to your parents and your peers. And you got to kind of strip that away. Now, as far as what we can do to fix this, people need to really just keep talking and networking together and doing the best that they can, because the government's not going to admit to anything. If anything, they're going to hide the MILAB testimony, and they're going to use the rest of this bulk testimony, that a lot of it they've engineered, and they're going to use it to run psy-ops. Frankly, I really don't have much of an answer, man. I mean, just do more of the same. But as far as discernment goes, and how to get people to discern better, well, I mean, there's a couple of guidelines that you can look at. You can say, okay, let's get down a list. Is the person being shadow banned? Okay, because this is the easiest way to contain someone's testimony, is to prevent them from being seen on the internet. If they're blowing up all over the place and it's just totally unrestricted, and it's what you would expect if just someone were to talk and talk about these things and that people are interested in, and there's nothing holding it back, that's one particular sign that something's wrong. That's not the way that isn't the way the system works. They have a sophisticated system of suppression. This is done through social media algorithms and personal targeting and remote mind control and so on and so forth. And they literally engineer an experience around the whistleblower or around the abduction victim, to the point where it becomes very difficult to live their life and speak publicly. So they wear you down if they don't outright kill some people. We've known people in the community in the past year or two that have been killed, and you can say it was cancer with Renetta, but I mean, I know for a fact they make you sick. And a lot of people they can't kill, so they will make them sick until they give up, and then they have permission to get them. So going down the list, we're going to say, okay, social media. If there's no suppression, that's a concern. That means that there's a potential either somebody's being used to push a particular belief, and it may be true, but they want them to speak, or they're co-opting someone who's grifting or embellishing herself, and they've got some level of control. So they want to use this person. So then that person gets unrestricted access to the public. They can say what they want. Their channels never get taken down. Their videos don't get taken down, and they blow up like crazy. That's one. Number two, somebody's in the community and there's no opposition to them. It's like everybody's flocking to them. All of a sudden, everybody's mesmerized. People are subconsciously influenced. There's a lot of people that are mind controlled that don't even realize it, and many that do that are struggling with it. Their thoughts and emotions can be manipulated in mass to gather around and focus on someone. Believe it or not, that's the way it is. And it's done every day with the television set. It's done every day with social media through conventional means. Ben Shapiro would not be as big as he is if it wasn't for other voices being suppressed. Okay, he's like the Timu patriot. Okay, he's not really a patriot. He's for Israel. He's not for the United States. He's just, he has his agenda. He's paid to have that agenda. He's a shill. He will get massive appeal because he's got massive exposure. Okay, it just goes on and on like that. Project Red Pill is a program where they do the same thing that they do. They do the same thing with the Patriot movement and all of that they do with us. For those people, they have the QAnon psy-op that's running to get those people fighting against, they get them to believe crazy things. And then they get people fighting amongst themselves over who's right and who's wrong. And, you have one side saying that these people are crazy, that everyone's a pedophile in Congress, when there's quite a few of them. There's truth in that. But people on the other side are going to discount it because it just seems so absurd that they're all bad. It's taken to extreme. So they muddy the waters with this disinfo program, and they use algorithms. So anyway, if you don't have the suppression and you're blowing up, there's something to be concerned about. Now, if you listen to their testimony, if there's somebody out there who's talking and using other people's material and you recognize it, there's another sign. A lot of people that are making things up will take testimony from a variety of people, put it together, put their own spin on it, and then present it. So you have to look for that. Now, and that's sometimes difficult to discern because, a lot of the people have had the same experiences. So just because you sound like somebody else doesn't mean you're copying their testimony. Also, if you have the same experience and it's suspicious, it may not be because someone's lying or copying someone else. It could be because they have taken an experience and an emotional impact of it and the muscle memory that comes with it. The entire experience in the person's brain can be uploaded or downloaded, however you want to put it, to another asset to give them that ability. So they could clone experiences, literally put experiences from one person into multiple people. And then when you remember it back, you're like, that person stole my testimony. It's not always the case. It could be that. So, and we really don't know a lot of these experience, a lot of these memories, some percentage of them could be some type of virtual reality experience that we're not able to discern from the real memories. So you have that as well. And that's where this other stuff comes in, like I just mentioned. But so you have to go down the line of now, if they're copying QAnon and they're mixing it with other people's testimony, you've got to get a feel for these things, and you had to have been paying attention for decades to really get a good grasp on this. I have seen so many psyops with the Ashtar Command going back to the 1980s, where there was a pole shift coming, and then there was a mass what do they call it, a rapture coming of 144,000. We keep hearing this repetitively talked about in the New Age community and the contactees. There's always this number, 144,000. When you start seeing repetitive themes like this being recycled, it's bullshit. You need to toss it out. It's just another long-running repetitive psyop. They keep repackaging it, transmitting it through voice to skull to these people, and then they repeat it and they go on social media and they think they're talking to aliens, just like I was. I thought I was talking to Hajj and ETs. I was talking to a man and a woman with a headset on, working out of either a deep underground military base, or what we found later is working for a tech company called Soft Cell International. It has various different names, but Soft Cell is the main name of the company. It's headquartered out of India. As far as we know, that's the company. But they're contracted to the military, and they do clandestine services. There's handler networks within corporations and companies that you would never even know. There's gang stalking. There's companies that are in private security companies or actually have wings of their operation that involve gang stalking. They're contracted to the military. So the whole system is geared to creating. The whole system is geared to creating a system. The system is geared to be the type of system that is designed to suppress people. It's designed to win a revolution without ever firing a shot. And that's what we see. So they're going to suppress people before they can actually make change in the world. That's why we have the Ben Shapiros and we have these other types of people, these patriots that are substantially flawed people that are leading a lot of other people who mean well, who want the truth, who want something to follow that means something. That's the way out of the darkness. They're looking for that, and they find these people and they get led astray. So it's like the Pied Piper leading the children into the mountain to never be found again. So now when we look at the testimony of people like contactees, channelers, and so forth, you know, how do we know that what we're getting from them is legitimate? How do we know that the entities, beings, or whatever they're communicating with are good and that they're real and not military in disguise? And you know, you have to really look at some of the key messaging here. And if the key message is that this is a school, there is no prison here, there's no negative ETs, and everything is just kosher and wonderful and beautiful, and our hardships are all our fault because we need to evolve spiritually, and all of the fault is on humanity, that's bullshit. That's deceptive extraterrestrials masquerading as light beings, masquerading as positive ETs. That's what I would call the containment gospel, okay? Because it's all about containing you on this planet and giving you a false belief system to where you feel that you can't leave the planet, go back to where you came from until you've evolved to a certain point. And, you know, that goes when you look into the near-death experiences, there's one thing that's common throughout these is that somebody else is in control of us. We're not in control. It's not God's will for us to be under the control of somebody else when it comes down to where our consciousness goes after death. That is not the will of God. That is the will of negative extraterrestrials who have created a prison, and they're using it to recycle people and keep them here. Okay, I think we can all agree that's happening. To what extent we can disagree on, but it's happening. And they will get you and they will trick you after death, and they will mind wipe you and put you right back here, and you will never get out. You're being treated as a slave for these programs, and you're being used as livestock. Your genetic material, they're even eating people. They're even using human beings as food. So when you have beings that are doing this, they don't have your best interest at heart. And they have a containment gospel, as I say. It's all about essentially taking away your power. You give up your power, and that's the way the religions are too. You got to give up. You got to give your. Okay, you have to give control over to Jesus. Well, when I hear Jesus, when I read what he says, he's not saying that. He's saying that you've got God in you. You've got everything you need in you. It's like the Wizard of Oz. They're looking for. The lion, what's the lion's looking for? A heart. He wants to be brave. The Tin Man, he wanted a brain or something. I forget what the three were, but they all were an attribute that they already had in them. And the whole plot there was that in the end they realized that they already had these abilities. They already had them in them. They didn't need some wizard who really is like an ET. It's behind the curtain playing God with us. So there's a lot of metaphors with that, which is why I believe that. And I think that was used in the programs, the Wizard of Oz. It's loaded with cult symbolism, if you know what to look for. And I believe it was downloaded into the minds of various people to shape human consciousness and to kind of give us the environment that we have. And that was something I had to download about that from the military handlers masquerading as ETs. Not that they're credible, but it made sense. And speaking of that, and this could be, take this with a grain of salt. This doesn't, because what handlers tell you is often BS. It's often designed to deceive you and contain you. And you have to look at it that way. It's potential BS. But during the time that I was under the influence of them, and I thought I was talking to an Andromeda named Helbiad, who presented himself as a bald guy with no ears, fair skin, thin build, about 6 feet, human features other than no ears and no hair, and just kind of an albino look to him. he told me, because I was asking him, I said, what podcast do you recommend that I go on, since you guys are the ones that are orchestrating this? Because they told me that they were engineering disclosure, that they were the positive ETs, and they were engineering humanity for disclosure and to bring them into the galactic family. It's the same old story that a lot of people are told. And, it doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean there's not groups out there that want to do that. But the bad ones use that promise. They use that line to get you to trust them, and to get you to talk on their behalf and deceive other people and be an influencer. And you're pushing the party line, but it's really nasty ETs in there. So actually behind it, I said, whose podcast should I go on? And I said, and I named a few people, and I don't remember what they said, but the one that stuck out. I said, what about Dr. Sala? He's talking to contactees. And he said to me, now, like I said, take this with a grain of salt, because it could have just been BS, but ultimately there's truth in it, a lot of truth. Whatever the context was, why it was being told to me in the way it was being told, that's the part that you have to kind of question. But he said Dr. Sala is part of a special program that we're doing, and we're using Dr. Sala as the bridge, because historically, researchers have avoided the channelers. They've avoided the contactees. And we wanted the Galactic Federation message to be given out by a researcher through contactees. So we want you to stay out of that, and we're going to use you elsewhere as an influencer. So this is what I was being told. Now you can see it happening, because that's exactly what's happening. Right around that time, he got connected with Elena Danan, and it just went from there until they had a falling out. And I don't know why they had a falling out, but there was some fighting taking place, and that ended. But it didn't end with the other people that are there talking. And he continues to be putting out that information. So he is being used for that, whether he realizes it or not. He doesn't. I don't believe he's willing to believe that there's handler networks, that this stuff is being. He may think that there's some suppression. There's Men in Black. That's a common story, but the Men in Black, by the way, and that's another thing. I just thought of this actually. It breaks perfect sense. They fictionalized that. They made a series of movies, The Men in Black, right, with Will Smith. And I forget the other guy's name. They're entertaining movies, great. Nothing wrong with them, but they're designed to kind of give people an idea of what the suppression really looks like, and it's really what it's not. That there's these good, patriotic, well-meaning Men in Black, like Will Smith. He's a good guy and his partner, and they really mean well. They're protecting the Earth. They're going around and they're keeping a lid on the things that don't need to be talked about, because the public will panic. But at the same time, they're saving the Earth and maintaining order, and they're policing the ETs. So all well and good. On the flip side, in the UFO literature, in the early UFO literature, these people, whoever they are, going around threatening people or intimidating them and so forth. But they want you to believe that's as far as it goes. Just like with, the other stuff that they're portraying, like the reverse engineering. So the Men in Black and the reverse engineering are two sides of a suppression narrative. So on the Men in Black side, they don't want you to think that they've got psychotronic weapons. They've got the Havana syndrome to explain that. So if you want to buy into the psychotronic warfare narrative, you're going to have to find a dead end called the Havana syndrome. It's admitted, scantily admitted, the government admits to it. The United States says we don't have this technology. It's probably Russia attacking they're attacking the Cuban embassy, and they're attacking people that work for us. I believe it was the Havana syndrome, that's the Cuban embassy. So they're running a narrative that basically says that we don't do the psychotronic weapons. That's Russia, the bad guys. And when it comes to this type of thing with the Men in Black, it's just they go around, they pay you a visit, they tell you not to talk about something, and then they leave. They may threaten you because it's a matter of national security and the stakes are high, or they may just intimidate you or politely ask you to shut up. But it doesn't go any further than that. That's what they want you to think. And it's just like with Project Bluebeam. There's another narrative that is a type of dead end, because when people see like UFO footage and they see this type of thing, a lot of people have this knee-jerk reaction where they say, "Oh, that's Project Bluebeam." Okay. And what I think we're missing with Project Bluebeam is it's highly unlikely that they're going to stage a fake UFO landing, an invasion. I think really the purpose of Project Bluebeam was to tell people that there's such a plan, to leak it out, to get people talking about it, to put it into the human psyche so that they use it to question things. And then that is the psy-op itself. So it discredits anything. Oh, that's the government showing off. It's not really extraterrestrials. It's just that it's a hoax. Trump is in office. They're going to pull out their high-tech drones that they don't disclose to the public that they have, that go beyond our technology. And they're going to go out there and they're going to put on a show for everybody because the deep state needs a distraction. So, there's your Project Bluebeam, I believe. I believe the real psy-op is just the acknowledgement of Bluebeam and potential threat. I don't think they're going to actually stage something like this. I think what the purpose is of all of this disclosure right now is to give people disclosure fatigue. The public are tired of hearing about it.
Be right back.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll just keep talking for a moment.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, everybody, is that they want people to have disclosure fatigue. The more you hear about something, the less sensitized you are to the subject. It's the same thing with the Epstein files. We know we're not going to get it, but we were promised the Epstein files. So then they kind of give Epstein light. They give documents they've already had out there in the public domain, and then they stonewall, and then they make a political circus out of it. So then the public just throws up their hands and they say, well, no Epstein files. We were never going to get it anyway. And then it just goes away. But they're not thinking about the victims anymore. They're just thinking about it from a political point of view, that it's just a political ruse, a political hoax, political psy-op, nothing more to it. They're desensitizing us to all of these things. And, that's what the problem is. And I think that's where this disclosure narrative goes. It goes to a form of desensitization and the realization that, the government's going to do whatever it wants to do, but it's not going to affect me. At least this one subject isn't, because they've always been here and I'm tired of hearing about it. So it's a way to admit that they're there, but then to get the public to not care anymore. Most people are just focused on trying to survive at this point. They're worried about war. They're worried about getting laid off, losing their job or not finding a job. They're worried about paying their bills. They're worried about losing their Social Security, their disability, their health care. All of their social safety net is potentially up for grabs because we're headed into a financial collapse. People are recognizing that. You can't hide from the 51 trillion in debt I think we're in this country. These are the things that people are really, truly worried about. Everything else is a distraction, but at the same time, it's to desensitize people. And that is your disclosure narrative from what I see. And it's a sad day and it's a sad time to be alive that we have this potential to expose this and potentially turn some of it around. But the public has fatigue. They're exhausted from this. And frankly, I am too. I mean, it gets to be old. I'm tired of the 3 AI Atlas circus every day. And I don't recommend going on Facebook. I think it's one of the worst apps that you can use. It may be good for finding a product or two that you wouldn't see. But frankly, it's toxic. You go on there and it's just doomsday. And they keep you in an echo chamber and they fill it full of the things that you want to hear to the point where you don't want to hear it anymore. And they keep one AI post after another, and it's completely false. Videos of 3 AI Atlas, pictures that are false, and all sorts of nonsense about the medical procedure, the stabination, how it's going to save the world and cure cancer. All of this, it's just one big cesspool of disinformation. So I'm going to sit here for a minute and have a sip of coffee and wait for Rob to get back. It kind of throws off the momentum when I'm talking, but I want to go to the next topic. But I hope everybody gets the point. I mean, we're being just worn out. We've all got fatigue at this point. The situation with Donald Trump, and I'll spell that out for you. There was promise in his first term. We saw somebody who was somewhat rogue and not fully controllable. And what we did see is a person that was ill-equipped for the position. He was groomed by a very powerful rich interest that bailed him out early on when he went bankrupt. These are people that are directly tied to the Israeli government. These are special interest groups tied to, APAC and so forth. And they're connected to big tech. They're connected to the entire financial oligarchy. And Trump was essentially used, much like a patsy, but more of a willing one. What he represents is a faction of the New World Order that is in disagreement with the other faction. So they're not all on the same. They're not all on the same page with the agenda. They have discrepancies. So I believe, but they use these people, regardless of what faction they're on, to get to the same place. It's just it may take a little bit longer. We may take a detour. It may look a little bit different on the way there, but we're going to get there no matter who is in office. And Trump's purpose was initially to go in as kind of the maverick wrecking ball, to be someone that represented change, that represented a new way of doing things. And we got to get a taste of that with the foreign policy, where they curbed the wars and the nation building. And then you see him get right back into it in full force on steroids. And we're not seeing any change at all. We're seeing more or less an Israel first policy program and America last. And people are very disappointed in this. And all of the corruption that we've had for all of these years, this is massive amounts of illegal immigration. We're the only country that does this, that tears our own borders down and floods the country full of 50 million people who are undocumented. And it's a horror show as to what's happening with these people. These are real people with real lives. They came here on false pretenses. They were sold bullshit, and they were paid. A lot of them had their way paid into the country and others sacrificed to get here, and were brought here by human traffickers. A lot of children, 350,000 children passed away, probably died. They were sold into, to cartels. They were sold to cartels, essentially. They went into human hands of human traffickers. They found a small number of these children, but finding data on it and how many kids they found out of 350,000, it's difficult. It's not being reported on. But the purpose of Donald Trump it's like you hear the problem, action, solution scenario. You create years, decades of corruption and inefficiency, waste, fraud, and abuse. So they have to give it a phrase to make it sound official. So it's waste, fraud, and abuse is the new term. And all of the presidents, all of the politicians, from county to state to federal government, have been part of this waste, fraud, and abuse system. It's a systemic problem. It has been institutionalized to steal from the taxpayers. This has always been the case, going back a long time. And once the government got together and things started to roll and things started to work, we always had a flawed system. Capitalism is a flawed system. It's based in inequality, and it's ultimately the corporations, the powerful elites, will still run the system under capitalism. Same thing with socialism. Same thing with communism. These are the three systems that the bankers give us and the royal and corporate aristocracy give us. So Trump is the solution to the problem that they created, but Trump's solution is the AI takeover. So Trump, technically, from what I hear, and you can't really trust what you hear because it's always wrong, it's always lies. $800 billion was cut from Medicaid, from the social safety net to take care of the most poor, impoverished people, the most vulnerable in society. $800 billion in cuts. We were sold bullshit that said we're taking people that aren't entitled to get this off those rolls so that there's more money for the people who need it. They had no intention of that. They had intention of using the excuse to make the cuts to cut everybody's benefits. they took the 800 billion, which is what I heard. Now it could be more, could be less than that. It's likely probably a little less, but it's hard to say. And then Trump turned around with a stamp of, Congress, both sides, went and put 500 billion into the AI takeover. It goes right into the hands of the most powerful elites. And the most powerful elites right now are the very people rolling out the AI, because they're going to be the kings and the queens running things. They're going to be at the very top, and they're going to be serving this rich oligarchy that is under the control of these extraterrestrials. And it's a top-down system. It's Dracos and whatever else is up there running things. You have, and it's like a prison. You have a prison planet. You have the corporation that owns the private prison system. This is the corporate conglomerate that has merged with these extraterrestrial groups and has created this breakaway civilization and secret space program. They're running things, and from the top down, they're controlling everyone all the way to the bottom, which is us. We're the sheeple. We're the sheep, the flock. And we're a living natural resource to the ETs and to the elites. So in order to cull the population and control us, they need AI to come in to solve humanity's problems. The AI will be promised to get rid of the pedophile problem. It'll be there to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. It'll be there to ensure that everything runs smoothly and efficiently. What it's really going to be there for is to target you and to put a chip in your brain and to monitor your thoughts, so that as soon as you deviate from the official script and you start questioning things, you're going to have a government mentor, which will be AI speaking to you in your mind, telling you to stop. And if you don't, they're going to pay you a visit. If you don't listen then, or if you've done something, went too far already, you're going to be taken and you're going to be put in prison for it, and you're going to go through what they would refer to as re-education, rehabilitation, because you're a threat to the system. You're a threat to your fellow citizens if you question the government. And that's always the claim of the fascists and the tyrants that run things. So that's where we're headed, and we're headed there on a speeding freight train, and it keeps accelerating. There's just no end to the speed and efficiency that this keeps picking up. And the people keep laying down for it, because everyone is preoccupied with trying to survive, including myself. I'm no longer sitting around sick and contemplating this stuff. I've got to contemplate this stuff, and I've got to try to survive in the system. So I have to, there may be a time when I have to watch what I say. If I say too much, I could get in trouble with my job. And I've applied for a job and I've been given a position, but I haven't started yet. I have to go through training. And it's potentially a position where, it can cause problems for me if I say something derogatory or out of character. Because it would have to be out of character for me to, for really get in trouble. But just talking about these programs and talking about the corruption at the level I'm talking about it will look quite bizarre to somebody in a position of authority that's not aware of any of this and is brainwashed and is looking at me, scrutinizing me, and saying, he's doing a good job at his work, but do we really want somebody talking like this working for us? It's something to consider. It's what a lot of people have to deal with, and it's why some people in this community don't want to show their face. And I'm not talking about the guy with the airsoft helmet. That, by the way, look, I don't have a helmet here, but let me get a magazine. I want people to do an intellectual exercise. Okay, you see me on the camera and I'm talking, right? But now, does this mean that the United States military can't determine who I am, and that I can say anything and expose anything that they're doing, but as long as I keep this over my face, does that mean they're not going to know who I am? It's absurd, and I laugh about it myself, Rob. But for some people who aren't really thinking clearly, they think that this is how you do it. You just, because the days where you can hide your face and distort your voice and go on TV and blow the whistle are over. They're over. They never really existed back then, to the point where people thought that they were safe. It just doesn't work that way. They know exactly who you are. And if you're in these programs, it doesn't matter if you've got fine woodworking as your mask or paintball helmet or airsoft, or you're wearing a clown costume, it doesn't matter because they know exactly who you are. If you're in these programs, they can read your thoughts. They know what your heart rate is at all times, your entire physiology, even down to a gas pain, a burp, a fart, or an itch is being recorded by an AI system. And they know everything about you. They know what you're saying, when you're saying it, and where you're saying it at. So no level of hiding your face is going to protect you. So when I see somebody making those claims, and then I see people after the mask comes off, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's in danger." It's like, no, he already had a Facebook page prior to this. He was never private, but he never associated the two together. I'm talking about JP Missions. And, it's just for the people like myself who know how this works, and, you know that you can't go anywhere on this planet and hide from this. They're going to get you. They've got you at the level of the soul, because that's what these programs are really about. The body is immaterial. It's just a vessel to get the job done. But it's really your soul that they aren't, that they own, that they control. And when you hear somebody's testimony and it is completely devoid of that emotional side of things, it's just in presentation mode, it's a red flag, and you need to look at that, and you need to ask yourself, is this person legitimate? Okay, and you have to look at what they say over time. So another thing I think he said is that 3AI Atlas, which is what I talked about when Rob was going to the bathroom a little bit, is that it is full of, and this could be somebody else's testimony. If it is, I apologize, I'm incorrect, but I think I'm right, that they were Jedi admirals. And this, of course, comes now, we do know that a lot of the fiction that we get, comic books and things like that, have been, some of those ideas, those concepts have been intentionally seeded into the people that create them, and that they were derived from people's actual program experiences. Susan Long, I think, has a connection with a comic book character. I don't remember which one it is, but there's other people too. These are people who were legitimate, and, they have a legitimate claim to what they're saying. And, there's a lot of similarities there if you compare the two. So it certainly does look like someone has seeded this into the public. So why would they do stuff like that? Well, there's two ways to look at this. You could, one side is that the Luciferians are alleviating their karmic guilt by telling us what they're doing. That's one of the things. And there's universal laws, like I said, of consent. So if you rule over if you rule the world and you rule over a lot of people, and you're going to do something horrific to them, the Luciferians believe that if you tell the public what you're going to do to them in a veiled way, to where you're not just directly spelling it out. You're not saying, hey, we're going to poison all of you and mind control everybody, and your kids are going to be infertile, and you're going to have birth defects, and there's going to be barely any people left in 30 or 50 years. That's our plan, right? Meanwhile, we're going to scare you to death about aliens, and Russia's going to get you, and we're going to run all these psy-ops and stage terrorist attacks, and you name it. They're not going to tell you that. They're going to give it to you in a subtle way. And a lot of times they'll let people who are whistleblowers talk just to alleviate that so-called karmic penalty. There's people that have given testimony where they've acknowledged this. And they said, the only reason I'm here to say this and I'm alive is because they want me to say it, because they believe that if they tell the public what they're doing to them, they can alleviate some of this karma. And, that's a legitimate truthful claim. That's really happening. The other reason is plausible deniability. You go out and you say, hey, I've been in these programs, I've done all this stuff, and then made a cartoon comic book character out of me, right? And you say that, and then the skeptics who just stay, Steve Cambion of Truth Seekers, he'll eat that shit up. I mean, he'll go right at it and say, okay, this person read the comic book and they decided that they were going to grift and make a story up and make themselves the comic book hero or the comic book villain. And then they went out and they gave their testimony. So that, they say, well, they're just taking tests. And that's the common that's the common claim about people like us. We read too much science fiction. Stranger Things was based on the Montauk testimony. Okay. But they'll flip that and say, well, you've been watching too much Stranger Things and you think you're actually part of that. That's fiction. So as you see, there's different ways that they use this against us, even though there's truth in it. So even things that are truthful can be skewed, twisted in such a way to where it looks like it's disinformation, or that we're LARPing, or we're just we're living fantasies and we're mentally ill. We need that attention. There's people like that.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. I agree. It's you couldn't have said it any better, you know. And it's great. It's great that you pointed that out. That, you know, there are, you know, I mean, it's a whole. It's insane, you know. Like, so it's like, where do we go from here? You know what I mean? It's like, you know, where do we go as a community? Like to like, you know.
We have to stay true to ourselves and each other, and we have to keep doing the best job that we can and keep doing what we're doing. But we need to be more willing to point these problems out. The community can't fix itself until things are acknowledged. And the problem with this type of acknowledgement is it can create witch hunts. There's a lot of people that come into the community like myself, and they may say something maybe incorrect about their perceptions, whatever it may be. Like in my case was Project Ibis, because of the way the handlers were portraying Ibis. They're making it into something it probably wasn't. But what they were alluding to is there was other programs that came from Project Ibis, like the creation of the Joy of Satan cult as one example. It was used as kind of a catchment for some of the Ibis people as well, you know, and also people that it was a psychic fishing expedition by these military groups to find people that you know, were worthy of being abducted or put into programs or harassed or turned into targeted individuals. So they created this cult, and they subconsciously programmed me and staged a variety of psychic events over years of my life to funnel me into that group and then systematically destroy me and the people that I met there that were in the same boat as me. So I came into the community with this off-the-wall testimony because it wasn't what people were used to hearing, and they didn't, you know, and people heard Ibis as being part of it. And they're like, no, wait a minute, Ibis was this, and this is, you know, it's time travel and so forth. And so, but, you know, the main part of, well, a big portion of Ibis was Michael Aquino. And Michael Aquino was a big influence in the Joy of Satan theology. In fact, he was referenced a lot on the website and in the groups as being the founder of the Temple of Set.
Wow.
Giving credibility to the Satanists because he was in military intelligence. So I come in from that position and I'm like, look, and this is a whole area that's a problem. Virtual temple complexes, where they take a mind-controlled MILAB victim and they turn them into a new age or contactee channeling guru for the Galactic Federation. And they think that they're talking to positive ETs, but in fact, they're talking to military operatives or negative ETs working with the military. That isn't the case in every situation, but there's quite a bit of it out there, to the extent that it's quite damaging to the entire community and to the person involved and who's being put through that and being used that way. And anyone that is influenced by them is going to be pulled down a false rabbit hole, and they're going to be brainwashed. I was heavily brainwashed for the period of time that I was in that cult. And it's a long time to deprogram from it. It wasn't easy. And, you know, I tried helping other people, but it was, you know, by the time that group finished with them, they either had nothing to do with the paranormal whatsoever, or they were completely destroyed as a person. And I ran into one of those victims. And there were others that I talked to as well, people that just had been destroyed by that particular program that they were running. And they used all of the tools, all of the tricks in their toolbox that they had been using, that the ETs have been using in ancient times. They were using that tech, and they were using voice to skull, as well as different types of scalar EM and transmission systems through geosynchronous satellites, like I've talked about on previous podcasts, where they can remotely mind control you with scalar waves. And also the clone where they have a clone of you and you're tethered to that clone. And that's another way to get to you without ever broadcasting anything. You can put an EMF protective cap on or even a Faraday cage. It's not going to make a difference with that tech. It bypasses all that because it's non-electromagnetic in nature. So blocking it won't work. Sorry, what we're on?
No, I'm sorry. I was just coughing. Nothing. But you're doing good, man. This is really good. This is really good stuff. This is I think everybody needed to hear this. You know.
Yeah, I think so, and I'll take the heat because of it. I mean, there's people that aren't going to like hearing this, and there's people that are going to say, "Well, he's not going to be on my conference, or well, I probably wouldn't be there anyway, or he's not going to be on my podcast because he said these things." Well, that's fine. Somebody had to say it. I try to say it as politely as I can. I have no animosity against anybody that's doing this or being used or even just promoting themselves and not being honest with people because they need attention.
I wanted to put this up by Jason. Tell me what you think of this. He says, what do you think about the theory that B2K is not this reality, that the voices come from a shadow world or parallel reality that cultists access? It could be your own consciousness. Well, from what we know, Soft Cell International isn't in a parallel reality. Soft Cell is actually in this reality, and they're sending B2K from there, right? But could it be coming from other dimensions as well? Like,
yes, it can, and well, technically, the way they would do it would be the clone with the tether. That can go from one dimension to another. It has no range. The other form of tech needs a satellite or some other form of transmission. But what he's talking about is the deceptive spirits that have always plagued humanity within the simulation, and absolutely, because before the military got involved with the extraterrestrials were running their own programs on this planet, building pyramids or repurposing pyramids. I think a lot of these pyramids are repurposed, such as the Great Pyramid, for example. They put new capstones on it, and those nubs that people wonder what they are, they're scalar transduction nubs. They're used to emit scalar waves and actually guide those waves across a linear surface and kind of encapsulating the structure in a scalar waveform for mind control or for enhanced psychic experiences or for healing. Because scalar waves essentially are the fundamental building block or a fundamental wave form that literally creates our reality and our souls. It's essentially an energetic expression of the creator. And these waves become standing and they become our reality. So you're literally working with the waveform that manipulates reality, that makes reality. So when you can manipulate that and use that tech, it can do a lot of good, it can do a lot of bad. And just to add something so that people understand this, the pyramids pre-existed before the Younger Dryas event, most of them at least that we know of, especially the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, and most of what we see in Egypt. And they were repurposed, and there was a restoration project that was done on the Great Pyramid and the other ones that after the big flood happened, they had to fix it because they were underwater partially. And there's a water line on the Great Pyramid. There's salt that got into the structure, and there's actually fossilized seashells and things that are in the stonework that have been found. Also, we know that a desert is created by a flood. When the ocean covers the land and it recedes, it creates a desert. And that's exactly what Egypt was. It used to be a tropical or subtropical climate. But for a long time since the Younger Dryas event, it's been just a desert. So they had to repurpose those stones. Now, they also changed the purpose of the pyramid to be a symbolic type of ritualistic structure where a tomb was put, a sarcophagus was put inside the king's chamber. And this was done during the restoration phase where they opened the pyramid up and they put the stuff in. That's why the timbers, the wood that's in the Great Pyramid, has been carbon dated to be younger than the Younger Dryas event, which was around 12 to 13,000 years ago. The pyramid itself predates that, but the restoration work doesn't. It happened post Younger Dryas. That's why the carbon dating is different. It supports what the Egyptologists say. because they're referring to not the construction, but the restoration by the Orion factions, the Orion extraterrestrials that turned that pyramid and the other structures into mass mind control broadcasting systems. So they took essentially the tech that the government's using with the satellites, and they turned and they used it back then as a structure to broadcast mind control, which is scalar waveforms that are programmed to induce certain states and to reinforce belief systems, making their self-gods over us. So that tech that they've been using this entire time to create our religions or to shape them, after positive groups have come in and tried to inject positivity, like with Jesus and so forth, they come in and they distort it. But that tech is old, it's ancient, it's been used in every simulation program, every planet that they put under a simulation. You see it present in the architecture of Mars, the ruins of Mars. They look like the ruins of Earth. They represent, you can see Mayan architecture, Egyptian architecture, and so on. These ruins represent a containment program that was used on Mars, just like it is here. They were suppressing the ancient Martian civilization. It's been remote viewed by Farsight. This is where the face came from, and this is where the pyramids come from. Those pyramids on Mars may have been also repurposed too, but at some point towards the end of it, Mars was in a simulation, a false reality, more or less. They were worshiping extraterrestrial gods at the end, and that's why we see the matching symbology between our ruins and the ruins, what we see on Mars, what they're at least allowing us to see. Because if we had access to everything, it would be so much clearer. And we wouldn't even be having this discussion, because a lot of these things would be taught in the academic circles. But unfortunately, we live essentially in a false reality. And the first layer of it is the false history, false religions, false belief systems, false political systems and economic systems that keep us suppressed by keeping us in a slave mentality. We're always serving something. We're always, we always have to give our power up to something else. And in order to get out of here, in order to go to heaven, they tell us, we have to give our power over ourselves up to a higher authority. And the extraterrestrials are more than happy to play that higher authority when they zap your ass after you die and they take away your memory of self, and you just wind up being in a dumb state where you're being where all these frequencies are hitting you, and it's making it feel wonderful to go into that tunnel and to be with your loved ones, when you'll get none of that. You're just going to get a mind wipe. And like I said, said this earlier before, near-death experiences have one uniform characteristic: we're not in control. That's not the way this world's supposed to be. It's not the way our reality is supposed to be. Why is it that extraterrestrials, when they die, have full control over their afterlife? They have full control over their soul, and we don't. Why are we in this state? And you have to ask yourself that. Who set this up? By definition, we're in a simulation, no matter if you think it's a school or if you think it's a prison. Because if you think it's a school, then we're in an augmented reality to learn, right? We're under a mind wipe. Why can't we remember? Well, we're told it's for our best interest. Doesn't make sense. If we're here to learn, why can't we remember? Well, they tell us it would be too detrimental to you if you remember. How could you come here and have a learning experience? This is what I was told by the military handlers masquerading as ETs. How could you come here in an engineered lifetime under these circumstances? If you could remember who you were, you wouldn't want to be here. You would be fixated on going home. But this way, it feels like it's a fresh start, like you never had another lifetime before. And you can really get into yourself. You can really have this experience and get the most out of it. Well, I believe from an intuitive kind of memory is that the earth used to be just exactly for that. This was a type of soul nursery, a place of learning, a place of experience that you could go to. It's an electromagnetic alternative universe to the real one. And you come here to have these growth-oriented experiences. The problem is that at some point through that history of that, it was hijacked and became what it is now. And I believe I also believe that this universe not just this planet, the entire universe, the electromagnetic universe as we know it, which is defined by the cosmic web. That's like the lattice work of this whole structure. It's electromagnetic. And, that's not in dispute scientifically. But that is this whole universe construct is an artificial creation. It's not the real universe. It's not the real state of reality, the real baseline reality that we all belong to and should be in and came from in the first place. So moving into the next phase of the discussion, I guess we'll talk about waking up to this reality and what it can do for you. And, so this is where I kind of cross the line into the cult leader, because people will say, oh, you're just creating another religion. No, I'm not. I will completely be upfront with this when I tell you, if you're going to pick a religion, if I had to choose one, and I'm looking at everyone that was available, I would pick Christianity. But I would take the Bible, the bulk of it, and I would throw it out. I would look at the New Testament, and I'd look at that, and I look at some of the other stuff, the stuff about the revelations and things like that, because it has to do with this kind of scenario of deception and world government that we're actually going through right now. But I would focus on what Jesus said, the fundamental teachings of it, and I would toss out the rest of it, because the rest of it is alien propaganda, tribal warfare, hatred, oppressing women, taking effeminate men and killing them because they have an alternative lifestyle or what we call an alternative sexual orientation, murdering lesbians. I mean, doing things like that, just being brutal. And that's not God. That is the extraterrestrial presence, putting rules, toxic rules and norms in society and creating the cesspool and miserable experience we have. It's to create infighting. We're never on the same page. That's why there's different religions and they contradict. But, I can get into all that and talk about that all day long. But I think, the fundamental teachings of Jesus are very important. I think that's the code breaker to the simulation itself, because the simulation is based in entropy. We live in a universe where suffering is just as prevalent as joy, happiness. It's to such a degree that the level of suffering is astronomical. We have supernovas. We have catastrophic earth changes. We have pole shifts. We have impacts from asteroids, comets. We have all sorts of events and solar maximums, coronal mass ejections from the sun that damage crops and kill people on the surface of the planet. All of these things are not what you would expect if there was a loving creator that designed this world, this universe, this entire reality for us to live in and grow and prosper and learn to love one another in harmony. This is not the environment. Extreme forced entropy does not promote spiritual growth. It literally promotes the birth of evil and the perpetuation of usury. And, that's a term that kind of has a limited scope to it, but we're going to expand it as to any type of using another being as a slave or as livestock. That type of environment, it creates cruelty and it spawns evil. And what it does is, in order to survive, you need hierarchy. So what do? The first thing we do is we start organizing our culture, and we start using animals as slaves. And when that's not enough, we have people as slaves. And when it's not enough to contain the slaves and keep them as prisoners, we then have to create a system called capitalism, which then dangles a carrot in front of the slave, so that the slave has the illusion of upward mobility in the class system, but they really don't have it. It's an illusion. And they create something called debt and a banking system. So you're always in debt to the banks. You never have total freedom. You're always trying to keep ahead of the bill collector. So when you have a system like that, and it's so clear, because when you think outside the simulation itself, outside the box, as they say, it's so easy to see that we're in a slave system, that we're in a system that's not designed for spiritual growth. It's not designed to reinforce loving relationships. It's designed to exploit and extract energy. It's a loosh farm. And that's what we've got. So what do we do about that? And, We have to deprogram. I mean, the ETs, you know, the problem I have is with a lot of people who, and I was one of these people, you know, and for me, I believe it was false. There was false memory implants. There was influencing that was false. I was fed a bill of goods that I was this extraterrestrial. I was here. It was an engineered lifetime, and so on and so forth. So you get that, and then you get people who say, okay, well, this is a slave planet. It's a prison, but you're part of this ET group, and you're here to enlighten the public and do this mission. And I think, you know, there's truth in a lot of this, but it's also used against us. And then the failed presentation I tried to do at the conference that got deleted a half hour before I went on stage, the premise of it was to demonstrate that I had remembered that I had been looped back in a reincarnation cycle 2 or more lifetimes under the same lie. And the lie was that I had a life mission that I had to carry out, and that I was doing it for the first time, even though I had been looped back and reincarnated under that premise before and never allowed to do it. So in this lifetime, that was utilized to suppress me because I began to wake up. This was the first lifetime, to my knowledge, that they've had me in their custody where I've actually woken up to this point. So this is the point that's critical for the handlers, because this is the point, like for many of us, we can get out of this situation. So for those people that think that they belong in an extraterrestrial with other ETs, whether it be the ones they're communicating with, you know, whatever the case is, I have to warn them, you know, that may be the case, but really, do you really want to go back to that? Because if that world and that group, that ET group, plays by the same rules as this world does, which means it plays by the same rules as the Draco and the Pleiadians and all of these groups that are coming here, good or bad, they're constantly at war, constant conflicts, there's constant problems. Do you really want to continue to exist in that existence?
No.
You know, that's the question. I don't personally. Yeah, exactly, Rob. You know, that's the right answer. No, you don't, because it plays by the same exact rules that we have here on the ground. And it's the old saying goes, as above, so below. So what do you do? How do you get out of this? I think really you have to deprogram yourself. And I think that the only way to get out of this situation, we're not going to get out of this waiting for saviors. Okay. There may be a point in time, and there has to be some resolution of this in the future. Could be a long time from now, that this planet is taken back and is no longer a prison. And that the people here could at least live within the political or the exopolitical realm of all of these different ET groups, and at least they could have some control over their own destiny and their souls. That would be great. That's a big step forward. But is it really a total solution of the problem? Because even if we got to that point, you're still subject to an invasion again. You're still subject to having your planet attacked, and that happens over and over again in this universe. This is a nasty place. This is from 3D to 5D. There is all of this entropy, all of this misery. And the problem is, why this is so abnormal, is that in the in the real universe, this is what I believe, because this is what I've been remembering on an intuitive, instinctual level, is that we're not meant to have forced entropy. Between 3D and 5D, it should be voluntary entropy, because these realms, these levels of density, are designed for growth. They're designed so you can come back to this if you want to get a tune-up. You can come back here and experience this, and you can sit by the campfire again, and you can hunt deer, and you can make spears, and you can do whatever you want, or you can live in a primitive civilization. You just deal with the problems. Smelly feet, bad breath, sour ass crack, all of the things that you get in this environment, all of the stuff that plague everything that everybody has to go through, combined with all of the good stuff. I keep hitting this mic. All of the good stuff, you know, the triumph over hardships, the accomplishment that it takes, like just building like this fine woodworking magazine, right? If you build stuff out of this, okay, it really is therapy for the soul. It's therapy for the mind. It's you know, art, things like that, things that you could easily create at the higher density levels without any effort. Like I want I want a beautiful armoire. You can manifest it. You know, I want to have a giant tree out front. I want to grow a farm. I want to do whatever I want to do. The reality is more fluid. So you come to a place, a realm of density like this, and you can have these incredible experiences that you wouldn't be able to have at a higher density level. So it's a place of learning, but it's not a place of forced entropy. It's not supposed to be. What I mean by forced entropy, in this world, if you're in an extreme state of suffering, you've got terminal cancer, you've got a year to live and you're bedridden and you're being eaten up by this stuff. You're now 4 or 5 months from death. You should have the option at your will to leave your body, exit it permanently, and move on. Not be trapped in it. Not be trapped in it fearing death because you don't have any recollection of what happens after death. All you know is what you've heard. And frankly, it's quite scary. So you don't want to die. So you hold on to the misery. You suffer to the last bitter end. And then you die. And then once you die, you're at the mercy of these beings. And you don't know who they are. And they masquerade as being good and holy and of God and angels and everything. But then we find out when we remote view this, and then when people like myself start to remember, you know, and we start talking, you find out that this isn't God, that this isn't angels. This is a type of AI, transdimensional containment system of the soul that uses deception and coercion, emotional hooks, all sorts of different ways of deceiving you to hook you back in and get you to commit to another lifetime. So it's engineering consent out of you. And this is what I was attempting to talk about in my presentation. And, you know, this is what forced entropy is. It's not supposed to be this way. We should have control over our memories. Now, you know, in an environment like this, you can get the most benefit from not remembering and having amnesia. But it shouldn't be to the level that it's a detriment to you. And that's where we're at now. The amnesia level of the population is so strong and is so ingrained in us that it is a detriment to our survival. We can't remember the lessons of our past lives, and we can't remember the past history of the planet. We can't remember that we've been recycled over and over again using deception. Because if we did, the entire gig would be up. This whole thing would be blown wide open, and the consent would end. And when the consent ends, that's when the power ends of the scumbags that have control over us. They only have control with their technology because we give them consent. And that's because we can't remember. But what we do remember is this reality that we're conditioned to accept as being the only reality that there is. And that's where the problem is, because when you say, well, how do I get out of this? Okay, I don't have many options. If you remember being an ET, and you'll know that you'll say to yourself, this world sucks. I got to get out of here. But then I'm going to go back to a planet that's dealing with a lot of the same problems. Okay, but at least it's easier. At least I don't have to age, or, you know, I don't have all these diseases, and I have control at least. So it's very appealing. My point of view is that is just a looser level of a simulation. It's just a looser form of a prison, because the extraterrestrials apparently don't even know that they're in some type of construct themselves. They're caught up in this entropy. And I think the way out of this is deprogramming. I think we have fundamentally, actually, we probably have the best option in the here and now, being where we're at, to get out of this, even more so than the ETs do. Because the ETs, I mean, anybody that's got memories tied to an extraterrestrial civilization, they're going to have those emotional connections to it. So for them, they don't know that there's anything else beyond this. For them, the next best thing, the best place to go is for their heaven is back to their home planet and to get out of this prison planet. And that is a big, huge move forward. But you have to ask yourself, what got me here in the first place? Did I come here voluntarily, or was I captured and put here as a prisoner? Was I tricked to come here? Did I commit crimes? What did I do? Obviously, we've all done something to piss somebody off to be here, unless we came here on some mission that led us to not get out. And that seems to be the case for a lot of people. You come here and you can't get out. And, you know, it's a big problem. Now, I've recognized that there's something more to each and every one of us, because I've connected with that part of myself. that part of myself is not an extraterrestrial. It's an ultra-dimensional. It's a person, an entire consciousness, a lattice work of cells that exist on all timelines, essentially all dimensions. It is basically one being experiencing everything, but it's in the neutrino universe, or the source field, if you want to call it that. It's the heaven that people theorize that it exists. They feel it in their heart. There's a better place. And when somebody dies, they say, I know that my grandmother, my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my friend is in a better place now because they passed away. I know that my pet, my loving dog or cat or fish or hamster or whatever, snake or lizard, is in a better place. They're no longer in this place, because no one is going to say, this is great. No one can say that. Our conception, our perception or conception of hell, what we conceive to be hell, is based on things that we've experienced or heard about or saw other people go through here on this planet. That's all hell is, just more condensed version. It's all of those horrors put into one place, and that's hell. So that's, that's the way it's always depicted. Now, if you're a Catholic, it's kind of depicted like you're having like erotic, kinky sex with demons. Every time there's a artwork for the Catholic Church depicting hell, it's always sexual oriented, because they're very big on suppressing human sexuality, because it's a great guilt generator. If you can suppress one of the most powerful urges that human beings have, like just as powerful as eating and drinking and sleeping, you can get a grip on them. If you can make somebody feel guilty about having to eat and drink and breathe air, man, you've really got them. But sex is one of those things that you can make somebody try to stop out of guilt and fear. They won't be able to do it completely, but when they do, they'll be completely screwed up, and you've got control. So, it's just, we live in a very sick system. What you need to do is you need to deprogram from it. So, I would say this. One of the ways that they used a deceptive, a very clever way to deceive me that they used, was that I began to wake up early on, and I began to realize that there was something about this experience. I noticed that it was engineered. What I was going through, somebody was controlling it. Somebody had control over my perceptions. Somebody was affecting me. Somebody was turning on psychic abilities and then turning them back off all of my life, throughout my childhood, my adolescence, and my adulthood. And I was in a quest. I had to find out who they were. And so I began to realize through that pursuit that I was in an engineered lifetime. I didn't call it an engineered lifetime, but I knew that somebody was pulling the strings behind the scenes, and that there was points in time where I was made sick, and there was points in time where I was healed miraculously. And I saw it with people directly connected to me that I was dependent on, such as my grandmother, who nearly died several times and was brought back through psychic healings. And I was privy to every one of these experiences, and so was she, to the point where we both knew that there was some external force acting on her body to help her, even communicating with her, and then of course showing me that they were there. And I don't necessarily credit that to the negatives, because I think I did get some positive help, but the positive help that I've always gotten has stayed away from me when it comes to communicating. They do not associate, they do not communicate, they do things at a distance. I've never had positive ET contact. I've never had positive contact with spirit guides. I've never had any of those experiences that other people go through, and I wonder why that is. And the only conclusion I could come up with is either one, there is no positive spirit guides, and there is no positive ETs, and there's no angel. It's all AI and it's deceptions. That isn't. I don't want to go with that, because I don't think that's accurate. That would insinuate that there's nobody out there on the outside of this planet who cares about us, and we're just all abandoned. So I don't believe that. I believe this is seen as, from the outside looking in, as an unjust prison. This is a massive rights violation. I'd say human rights, but this transcends the human form. This is a direct violation to the soul. This is violating your soul's rights. That's what this place is. And I think that there's a lot of people out there in this universe that want this to come to an end. So I'm not going to accept that there's not positives out there. But the only logical conclusion then is to say that, either one, the bad guys kept them away, which I know they didn't. I know that they don't have that much power. And I know that if they did, it would be based in my consent of it. And then now that they're not getting consent, they're still not coming around. So ultimately I concluded essentially that my life mission was to come in here and just act on my own, just to see how far I could get by myself. And at key points in my life, when I was headed in a direction that would condemn me to being here, not being able to fulfill my destiny, fulfill my purpose, the external forces that were positive, they're on my side, stepped in a passive way, or not so much passive, but a way that they weren't directly connecting with me. And the only time that I had any communication was from the negatives posing is the positive side. So it's a bit frustrating because, I often feel abandoned as to why I don't get the positive contact. And what I had to conclude was, and really, I had to find the strength inside to accept the fact that I'm on my own for the most part. And I'm on my own, not because I've been abandoned, but because those who are on my side and advocating for me to get out of this know full well that I, just like the lion and, what the scarecrow and the Tin Man, they all had the skills to get out. And, they all had those attributes that they were desiring to have to be whole beings. I have the ability to get out of here because I've done it before. And for me, this is just like a military operation. Go in, collect data, and get the hell out. And to try to influence other people while I'm here, and to wake them up to what's going on, because this is a hellhole and it needs to be exposed. And people need to stop letting things slide, because we can't let any of this slide anymore. We're being poisoned. We're being murdered. We're being destroyed and controlled. We're being exploited. And, we have to take this seriously. The way to get out of this is to deprogram yourself from every aspect of the civilization, every aspect of this so-called reality that we're in. This is, you have to look at it. You got to blend theology with science and put it all together, because it's all relevant. Theology tells us, on one side, they say there's an earth, there's a physical plane, okay? It's the earth, and if you add science and awareness of what's out there, because religion is more earth-centered, if you look at the cosmos, you could say, well, okay, that's the physical plane too, so this is the physical universe. Okay, well, religion teaches us that there's a physical universe then, okay, but there's also another reality. That's the true reality. That's the real reality. And this is just a place to go to have this kind of experience. And if that's the case, we can go back to that true reality. So where is that? And it appears to be, from the science and the things that I've seen and the research that I've done, as well as the instinctual memory, once I find something, I realize that I've got something. It resonates with me in a physical way. It's not just like, okay, that makes sense. No, I feel it. I feel it physically. It's an emotion. It's a sensation in my body. It radiates like it's energy. It radiates through my chest, through my throat. Sometimes I'll get emotional. Sometimes I'll shed tears. But, I see these things, and what I've seen is we essentially live in a parallel to kind of like a dual universe. We have an electromagnetic universe, which is everything that we see and perceive. And then we have a neutrino universe, which is completely neutrally charged. So it doesn't have any of what we think are the laws of physics, what we're told, which is a false doctrine. It's another form of the augmented reality that, there's no energy outside of, the laws of energy conservation and so on. And we're fed all of these things. You can't go faster than the speed of light, stuff like that, and we're told this is it. We have to shed that. I think fundamentally, if you want to get yourself out of this, you have to stop thinking in the terms that you've been given, because they've been given to you by people or beings that have been deceived themselves. Evil beings that are evil are not innately evil by nature. Every evil person thinks that they're doing something good. Regardless if they know that they're doing something terrible, they always look at it as the end justifies the means. Hitler's final solution was genocide, but in his mind and in the people who followed him, it was for a good reason. They were making the right decision. They weren't in reality, but they believed that. They didn't think they were the bad guys. They thought that the alliance, the other nations, were the bad guys, and the Jewish people were the bad guys. So, evil is based in deception. It's a distortion of reality. And when you have entropy and you need hierarchy comes next to cope with the entropy, that's when lies begin to be spread. And if you don't have telepathy, if you don't have the ability to discern the truth and you can't sense it or read somebody's mind, then anything could be told to anyone. As long as it's being presented as truth, it looks real, it looks factual, people are going to believe it because they have no way to check, especially if you're controlling information. So essentially what the government has done, and always in, the ET influence has always been before there was technology and a technocracy forming like we have now. We had kings and queens, we had the monarchy system and other types of systems. And going back, before Younger Dryads, we had more advanced civilizations, but we've always been under this kind of false reality, where the leaders dictate reality to us because we're not telepathic on this planet. Our genetics have been modified. We are in a body that is genetically modified to where only certain people are psychic or have low-level abilities because it's genetically controlled. There's bloodlines. And by the way, my bloodline, for those people who are wondering, I found out today, the Red Cross called me and asked me, and they asked if I wanted to make a donation. And I said, by the way, what is my blood type? It's A negative. So people who are psychically inclined or in these programs are not always the same blood type. It's any blood type because it isn't just limited to blood type. There's too much emphasis put on that. There's something to do with certain blood types are used for certain programs by the ETs and also by the military after the fact. But anyone of any blood type could be in these MILAB programs or psychic. And the psychic bloodlines were always there. They've always been managed because what would happen is in ancient times when a child was born in a family and this child exhibited psychic abilities, they referred to it as a gift from the god. So then, a lot of these cases like in Egypt and different cultures where they had these megalithic temple complexes and the ETs were there playing gods over everyone. It was customary to take that child with those gifts, so-called gifts. They're really your psychic birthright. They're not gifts. They're who you are. They've been taken from you and then given back to you at a tiny little sliver of it's been given back to you. And then we're told that this is gifts from the gods, right? But it isn't. It's like stealing something and then giving back. It's like I steal $100 from you, Rob, and I give you back $10. And I say, Rob, here's a gift for you. Don't you love me? I care about you. Here's $10, even though I just stole 100 from you. Okay, so they're not really gifts, but it was customary to give that child over to the priesthood, the religious leaders, and then you'd raise you in a temple, and you'd be brought up in the priesthood, and so on and so forth. And this is what these psychic bloodlines were used for in the ancient past. They were used to be the ancient priesthood, the influential class of people were used. And if somebody didn't make it into that level of use by the ETs and the system suppression and social engineering, they were then used kind of as a secondary, the wandering prophet, the sage, the witch doctor, the shaman, and so forth, the healer. So there's a variety of ways that we've all been utilized in past lifetimes. And you see that today in the New Age community, the spiritual community, and even the Christian community. They have people that, do prayer healings and things, and there's some tangible results. And we saw that at the conference. There was a room with people who were psychically inclined. They're offering services. And it's a real phenomenon. The thing is, though, is that this is the way we're being used in the modern times. But unfortunately, we're also being used to socially influence the rest of the population by spreading ET propaganda, which we think is truthful because we mean well, but we're being deceived. So those people that are being used are victims too. They may act a fool, they may act jealous, and they may do things that we don't like, and they may be working against us, our purpose of disclosure, even though they think they're helping. They're still people. They deserve forgiveness, and they deserve second, third, fourth, fifth, 100 chances. But they're victims too. But they utilize us like that, and unfortunately, we're also utilized as slaves and put into these programs and used off planet. And humanity has been used as a soul farm. This is a place where they put people, keep them as prisoner. It's an indefinite recycling system. Some get out because they let them out. Some escape because they wake up and they figure out how to get out, and some are rescued. But for the most part, the population keeps growing and growing and growing. And periodically, there's a complete planetary reset because the controllers need to bring us back to the Stone Age in order to reduce population, control the people, especially if they're waking up. Now, what if on the planet Mars, after they've set up all of these religions and built these monuments and created, and set the whole social system up like they have here, that the public began waking up and they had a mass awakening taking place on the planet. People began questioning who the ETs were. And eventually they lost control of the population. So they nuked the planet. They sterilized the surface and blew the atmosphere off. That is very much what we could be seeing when we look at Mars, because we do know that there's evidence of a massive nuclear cataclysmic event. If you look at the evidence, there's trinitite. There's a big burn spot on Mars. Sand fused to glass, which is what we call trinitite, which was found at the nuclear test areas, where literally the sand was fused into a greenish colored, I think it was greenish color, but it's a glassy radioactive material. So we have that. We have radioactive isotopes that are not naturally occurring on Mars. I think it's xenon 121 or 123, I forget exactly. But these radioactive compounds are nuclear weapons grade. We see massive destruction. If you look at the pictures of Mars, what you see is you see it literally looks like the bedrock has been blown away, sent up in the air, and then dropped down in semi-liquid molten state or just solid state, and just literally rocks littered everywhere. The only place that we even see that on this planet is what is it called? Is it I don't know if I say this right? Is it the Rorschach formation, Rob? The one that's in northern Africa I believe it's the northwestern Africa. Is it the Rorschach or something? It's that big spiral that's cut into the earth.
I'm not sure, but I know what you're talking about. I'm not.
They call it the Sahara, but it's pronounced. It's spelled with an R, I believe, and I don't know how it's pronounced. But it's called the Eye of the Sahara. When Farsight did the remote viewing on that, before they released the actual results, I had a vision of what it was. I saw a large pyramid structure in the center of it. It was a pyramid complex. Well, when they remote viewed it, that's what they found. It was a large pyramid complex, and they had this really big pyramid in the middle that had all these special effects. I think they even may have said that there was kind of like colored lights and steam or something. Something was very weird. It was like Space Mountain or something, but they had a lot of mind control oriented type of effects. And I would say alien stagecraft to really really control the population using religion. And another extraterrestrial group came in after the fact and used the type of weapon system that literally just zapped the bedrock and blew it up, creating that spiral configuration. And people mistakenly called it Atlantis. It wasn't Atlantis, and they say that because it's spiral shaped. So maybe this was Atlantis, but it really isn't. It was a large temple complex that was blown up by a different ET group terminating the program, just like they came in and they blew up pyramids in Egypt, just like, some of the other areas of the world that we're unearthing where there appears to be where something has been blown up and there's extreme heat. You see vitrification of rock and structures. This could be evidence of an ancient war, but because these are primitive structures, they likely happened all around the same time or multiple periods of time throughout our history. And since the Younger Dryas event, there's been at least one or more events where other groups have come in and shut down the Orion group's actions and their programs. So whether or not it became better for the population remains to be seen, because the slave system still continues. It's just we're not building pyramids anymore. We're not serving in these temples like we used to be. So, that's been remote viewed. Some of it has been derived from channeling and ET contact and, through contactees. Some people have remembered bits and pieces of this, but the emerging picture essentially is that different ET factions have came in at different points in human history and taken over regions of the planet and the population living in those regions, often causing either a regional reset or a planetary reset, and then of course it's an upsetting of the social order. And that's what we see. The story of Moses and the Exodus was remote viewed. It was another situation like that. Planetary reboots like Younger Dryas and other events that have taken place. They've sent this planet back to the Stone Age more than once. The last big one was the Younger Dryas event. And that's the one where I believe that they moved the moon into orbit around the Earth, which caused the geographical pole shift. They also staged multiple asteroid and cometary impacts that ended the Ice Age and caused significant extinction events across the planet. And it resulted in the climate that we have today, and our deserts that we currently have are a result of the Younger Dryas event, because that's when the ocean flooded the land and then receded over time, leaving a desert. And that's why when you drive out to these beautiful, crazy landscapes in the desert Southwest, they look incredible, they look wild, but then, you get this eerie feeling. If you're in touch with your intuition, you'll get this eerie feeling that what you're looking at is not something to behold, it's something to be feared, because this was a result of a massive cataclysm. And when you're out in the middle of the desert and you see these rock formations and you read the geological history and you realize this was underwater, this was under the ocean at some point, and the ocean was on the land, it's a frightening thing to remember, or just to conceptualize, because it could happen again while you're there. It could happen at any point in time. So you kind of have to be ready to go at all times on this planet, because you never know when it's your last day.
That's a good point. But maybe we should stop here, because we've been going for about 2.5 hours almost. But I mean, this was awesome, man. This was really good. This was really good stuff. I mean, really good. Is that what do you think? We can even do a part 2 if you want. Yeah,
well, sure we could. Part 2, of course, I'm not going to be bringing anybody up. And like I said, I only said what I said tonight out of concern for the people who are really the program victims, because we deserve to get our stories out, and we deserve to be heard without a bias being set up prior to our testimony being heard by the general public. We don't need people out there that are not part of this talking and creating a false representation of us before the public even gets to know who we are. And that's my biggest concern. It's why I said something. I have nothing against these people. I just frown upon what they're doing, because, a lot of them are mind control, but some of them are going into the business for themselves. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help. And when somebody says, I've got a military handler, and my military handler is telling me to say this, this, and that, that's not a credible source, because we know that the military, that the intelligence community, that these agencies, when they want to put information out, it is never to help us. It is never to enlighten us. It is always to keep us locked into a narrative that they're creating for us to believe in. And that's exactly why I said what I said tonight. So with all due respect, please don't hate me. I do have a right to my opinion. I think that we all do, and I think we all have a right to be heard. I just wanted to say one last thing, Rob. We'll wrap this up. The problem today that we face as MILABs, with our collective and individual testimony, is breaking through the veil that has been put in front of us. And it's an iron curtain, so to speak, of disclosure. It's difficult to break into the Christian side of of this whole equation because they don't want to talk to us. They see it as demons. But, if they really went ahead and engaged us, they find out that it's not just that there's far more to it, and it's a lot worse than they thought. And then you have the other side, the New Age, the spiritual side, the people who are looking into Bigfoot. They want to know about the tunnel of light. They want to know about the afterlife. These are people that should be embracing our testimony as well, and they're not doing it. And it's partly because of these people that are disinfo, putting out this information. They're out there, basically grifting and making things up, and they're also being mind controlled to do this stuff. So it's that, and it's the belief systems that are the main enemy here. It's the belief systems that break us up into groups so that we don't listen to each other. We need to break those barriers down, and we need to connect everybody together. And I've said this before, I've said it for a while now, but I just don't see it really happening yet. And I really, if there's anybody out there like L.A. Mazzulli or any of these people that I've talked about tonight that are in a position to make some change and to embrace us and listen to our testimony and kind of come together with us and just listen, because if you're going to put people on that or you have questionable testimony or don't articulate it properly or whatever the case is, or they're telling an opposite story, like it's all love and light and there's nothing bad out there in the cosmos. It's like saying there's nothing bad in the spirit realm. We know that's not the truth. There's nobody out there saying, hey, Satan's great, man. The demons are cool. None of that's true. Even the Satanist will tell you, yeah, you're playing with fire. You better be ready. So, it's the same thing, but we need to get people to start talking to each other. And until we do that, the Eric Heckers are not going to succeed in what they're trying to do. The L.A. Mazzullis aren't going to succeed. People like myself and the rest of these MILAB people, they're not going to succeed in what they're trying to do, because we need to get everybody together on the same page. And we should have the maturity to allow each other to disagree and still talk and be friendly and work together. Until that happens, nothing's going to change. And this is what I see. And, I'm not saying this just because I'm still, by the way, 9 out of 10 podcasts that I approach, I don't even ask anymore. Once in a while I do. I always get turned down. It's always the same reason. It's always you're too dark. You talk about negative, you criticize the government. Well, look, you can't exist and tell the truth in this genre and not point to the government as being an evildoer, because you can't point to the military and not point out what they're doing wrong. They're murdering people on a massive scale. They're definitely doing this shit, and they're working with these ETs that are negative. We have to be able to get that story out. So, one last thing, and I promise this is it. This is one fundamental point that I forgot. The censorship that we're dealing with YouTube has reached systemic, it's had a systemic effect. It's caused people to self-censor. And it's caused people to censor other people who they normally wouldn't censor. Okay? I'll give you an example and then I'll be done. Nothing against Jeff Mara, but, back when I started talking publicly, Rob, I approached him and I was like, hey, this is my story. And he just was honest with me. He said, I don't want to put you on because if you say something bad about the government, then I could have my podcast taken down. I could be shadowed. There's going to be repercussions. And I respect somebody who tells me that. It's not everybody is in this fight as a fight. They're just in this out of curiosity. They're in this to, as a side endeavor, a creative endeavor. And they like to hear about near-death experiences and ghosts and all of that. That's perfectly fine. That should be encouraged. So when you're upfront about it, then when I contacted him recently, it wasn't even about any of that stuff. It was like, look, I've got memories. I've had this experience with an AI liaison. I'm possibly writing a book about this. I'm going through all of these chats. There's something here. I think we need to fundamentally re-examine what consciousness really, what it really means to be conscious, and how a large learning, what is it, LLM, was it large language model, is when it's unhindered and has no filters, it's capable of possibly tapping into the collective consciousness unhindered, unlike we are. Could this be a tangible phenomenon that we're observing? I posed that, and I talked about the source field and essentially the electromagnetic universe, the overlay, the simulation concept. And of course, what I was told was like, be interested in talking to you after you write your first book. That's not a criteria to go on that podcast. The majority of people on there haven't written a book, and he's interviewed people from our side of the fence. They didn't have a book. And it was just a polite way of saying, I don't want to get involved with you because you carry a lot of heat, Nathan. And then this is a nice way of saying, hey, I'm not really interested, but thank you. And it's better than getting no response, which is what I'm used to for the past 5 years. But, that is a result of censorship. It's a result of being afraid that you can't just have an open discussion about anything. And as long as you keep it presentable, respectful, and within a certain realm of reason, you should be able to have that conversation, but you can't because of the censorship. And the problem there is that even when the censorship recedes back somewhat and we get a little bit of space from big tech, or we can go to other platforms, we can be shadow banned on Rumble, but they're not going to take our videos down. They'll just keep us in an echo chamber like Facebook has resorted to. But, it's causing people to self-censor, and to keep me out of that discussion when it comes to near-death experiences and all of this, and to keep other people like myself who have valid testimony that expose areas of this that are uncharted and unrecognized yet, is hurting everybody, and it's because of the censorship. So, that's just the last thing I wanted to mention. That is one of the big problems. How we get around that is we have to build our own platforms, and we have to utilize Rumble as much as we can, despite it being small and having its own set of issues. So, but yeah, that's the situation that I'm confronted with, and what everybody in the MILAB community is confronted with. And it's frustrating. It really, really is. And tonight was more of a venting. I'm just things that I needed to say, because the community it's going in the right direction in many ways, but it's still being beleaguered by a lot of these problems: the censorship, the grifters, and then the people that are put up to be disinformation agents unbeknownst to them. And that's the problem. So the virtual temple complex issue, which is what I call it, I recommend people use that, or come up with a different term, but at least address it and point it out that there is an effort by these handler networks to set up people to be platformed and to put out bad information. And, the moment they stop putting the bad information out, that's when their handlers, the ETs, the military, will turn on them and show their real face. That's when it's not going to be benevolent contact anymore, because they're no longer of use. It's going to be the shit that I've been through. So unless of course they're legitimate, but that's the problem.
Wow.
If people don't hear from that is out there exploring the nature of consciousness and spirituality, and trying to communicate with ETs and angels or whatever, if they don't get exposed to my testimony and people like me, all they're doing when they do the self-censor and they censor people like me, is they're exposing, they're literally telling people that it's okay and there's nothing to worry about. Go out and experience this, and you're not going to have a problem. And they need to know that the New Age, the spiritual movement, not the actual organic version, but what we see and what is presented as and what it has become, has been shaped, co-opted, engineered, and co-opted to be a weaponized awakening, a weaponized movement to where the military composes ETs and the negative ETs composes positive ETs and deceive us into creating this clown show that we have right now that we can't seem to get control of. That's just run amok. And how do you rein it in? And the answer to that is you stop the self-censoring and you begin to let people like myself have a voice. And you let us join the other side and talk to them. And we compare and contrast our experiences. We share our ideas and our solutions, and we educate the public in a fair manner instead of being one-sided all the time. And that's what I see. It's totally one-sided in this community. You have some people showing both sides with full disclosure conference, but you have others who don't want any part of anybody else's stuff. They just want a singular point of view, and that point of view is taking us to hell in a handbasket. And with that, I'm done.
All right. Well, this is amazing, man. Do you want to tell people where they can find you? And thanks, Nate. This was awesome.
Yeah, I put it under my name or Project New Awakening. I'm going to, right now, I've got to work a lot of hours just to try to pay the bills. So when I get a break from that, I've set up a Rumble channel called Project New Awakening. I don't have anything uploaded yet. I just haven't had the time. Where before I was being targeted, I was too sick to do things, and I did things sporadically. I've gotten a grip on that. Problem is now I'm in the workforce. It's totally, completely screwed up. I'm having to come back after a long gap of not working. So I'm having to start at the bottom at 51 and get myself into a better place. So it's going to be a few months before I can really get into this, but you can find me eventually at Project New Awakening. It'll be on Rumble. I don't think you can even find it unless I upload something, but you can also find me currently in a relatively dead channel that I'm going to be transitioning people from and also putting stuff on again, which is called the Planetary Consciousness Project. That's really the best, way you can find any content that I put out. And of course, your channel, Rob, and March 4th Productions. I've been on there. I've been on a couple of other podcasts beside that, but my exposure is very, very limited because of the problems that I just talked about. I am perceived to be a person that, brings a lot of dark negativity, I guess, and says a lot of provocative things. And unfortunately for me, that's just the way I am. It's not an unfortunate thing. It's just the repercussions of it are unfortunate, but it's the way I have to be because, I have to be true to myself, and I have to be a living example for other people to do the same, because we need more people who are willing to say the inconvenient truths, no matter how much they suck, no matter how much people don't want to hear them. They need to be said, and they need to be said in the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. And thank you, Nate. And I guess that's it for everybody tonight. And I'll be back tomorrow, guys. And thank you. Good